Good evening. It's 9 o'clock on television, on radio and online. In the United Kingdom and across the world, this is Mark Dolan Tonight. Developing this evening, following an assassination attempt on the 13th of July, which saw him almost killed, gunshots have been fired in Donald Trump's vicinity at the former president's golf club in Florida. Well, here are live pictures coming to us from the Sunshine State. We'll bring you the latest live from the United States on this shock new development in the race for the White House. Also tonight, the Duke of Sussex at 40. My verdict. Will the prodigal prince ever come home? Also tonight, are Labour about to adopt a Rwanda-style scheme in Albania? I'll bring you more on this surprise development following 8 more deaths in the Channel and more record-breaking numbers crossing this weekend. And the halo has slipped for St Keir Starmer, who's embroiled in an almighty row over a cash gift to his wife for luxury clothes and accessories. I'll be tackling this growing political scandal at 10. You won't want to miss it. And in a Mark Dolan Tonight exclusive, I'll be joined live in the studio by a woman violently attacked by a hammer-wielding thug last year who was released early under the early release scheme this week after just 6 months of his 3-year sentence. She's furious. She tells me her extraordinary story before the end of the hour. So, Prince Harry at 40, my verdict, straight after the news headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Mark, thank you and good evening. The top story, as you have been hearing this evening, Donald Trump's campaign says he is safe following gunshots in his vicinity in Florida. NBC Network, citing a senior police officer, said Mr. Trump was at Trump International Golf Course in West Palm Beach when the incident happened at 2 p.m. local time. As a precaution, the Secret Service agents moved him to safety. A witness said he saw 20 or more police cars flying from nearby streets as he described the emergency response outside Mr. Trump's golf course. Mr. Trump was injured in an assassination attempt in Pennsylvania on the 13th of July. Well, the Secret Service have also confirmed this evening in a post on X that they were investigating a protective incident. Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office is currently holding a briefing on the incident, and we'll bring you more on this story as we can get it. In other news, Home Office figures show 801 illegal migrants crossed the English Channel in 14 small boats yesterday. That's a record daily number since Labour came into power and brings the total who've crossed this year to over 23,200. That's as 8 migrants died overnight whilst trying to make that same journey across the Channel. 53 migrants were on board a boat which got into difficulty off the coast of northern France. Around 51 of those survivors were rescued. 6 were taken to hospital, including a 10-month-old baby suffering from hypothermia. Now, this news comes less than 2 weeks after a separate incident where 12 migrants died after a boat sank off the French coastline. The Foreign Secretary has defended the Prime Minister following allegations that Sir Keir Starmer's broken parliamentary rules by failing to declare donations of clothing for his wife. The Sunday Times reported the gifts came from Labour donor Lord Ali and covered the cost of a personal shopper, clothes and alterations for the Prime Minister's wife, Victoria, during the election campaign.
This is not a breach of transparency rule. It's a Prime Minister that's acting positively to make sure that everything is above board. And this money comes from a long-standing, over 2 decades. Lord Ali has been in the House of Lords. He has been a big supporter of the Labour Party. He's a self-made man, and I think there is nothing to see.
Sir Ed Davies says the NHS cannot withstand Labour reforms without more funding. The Lib Dems leader made those comments during the second day of the Lib Dem party conference in Brighton today. Earlier this week, Sir Keir Starmer said the NHS will not get any more funding without reforming, as he laid out a 10-year plan to fix the health service. Sir Ed Davies says he's concerned that the government is talking about reform before investment. And Ukraine's president has pleaded for the UK and the US to give permission for Ukraine to use Western missiles to strike Russian targets as Vladimir Putin's forces carried out another bombing raid. Volodymyr Zelensky called for decisiveness as he urged leaders to overcome the fear of making the choice. Sir Keir Starmer and Joe Biden met in Washington on Friday for talks on giving Ukraine permission to use long-range missiles to target Russian airfields and military bases, but no decision was reached. Now, the issue is likely to come up again when Sir Keir Starmer, Mr Biden and Zelensky all attend the UN General Assembly in New York later this month. But this evening, Zelensky says he wants a quicker outcome. And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. Now it's over to Mark Dolan.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thanks, Tatiana. Good evening. A vile hammer attacker released from prison 2 years early this week. His angry and terrified victim joins me live in the studio. And the Prime Minister embroiled in an almighty row over a cash gift to his wife for luxury clothes. The halo has slipped for St Keir Starmer. That's my take at 10. Lots to get through. A busy hour. But first, my big opinion. Prince Harry turns 40 today, but what is there to celebrate? The press have said that today will be focused on time with his family. But which family would that be exactly? Tucked away in his California mansion with his wife and 2 children, he's 5,000 miles away from his father, his brother, his uncles, aunties, cousins, in-laws and friends. Whilst any other 40-year-old would spend this special day surrounded by their nearest and dearest, Harry will mark this milestone in the fake and plastic world of Hollywood, more isolated than he has ever been. What is there to celebrate exactly? Can he celebrate his new social circle, which includes the Obamas, the Clooneys and Oprah Winfrey? Can he celebrate the millions he made from Netflix, earned by throwing his family and his country under the bus? Can he celebrate that dreadful book, Spare, in which he humiliated his brother, Prince William, with revelations of a fight that the two men had? Can he celebrate the podcasts and TV interviews in which he implied the royal family and indeed the British media were racist, that Charles was a terrible father and Catherine a less than perfect sister-in-law? Can he celebrate risking the lives of his former military colleagues by boasting about the number of Taliban he killed, thus placing a target on the back of anyone who served with him? Can he celebrate his wife's mocking of Queen Elizabeth II in the aforementioned Netflix documentary, or indeed causing Elizabeth emotional turmoil when, in her dying days, she had to worry about what might be in his tell-all book, no doubt fearing that he would destroy a family and a monarchy to which she had devoted her life? On his 40th birthday, can he celebrate turning his back on a country that once loved him? As a young man who was more popular than even Queen Elizabeth herself, this once fun-loving partygoer, a royal cheeky chappie and military hero, was the adopted son of the nation, only to become a prodigal one. He achieved our collective hearts and won them over, absolutely won them over, following the tragedy of his mother's passing and the unforgivable decision to make him follow her hearse at the funeral at the age of just 12. But Harry took that goodwill and he threw it in our faces. On this, his 40th birthday, it remains clear that Harry loves his wife, Meghan. For him, she is the gift that keeps on giving. But whilst it's my view that Harry must take responsibility for the decisions that he's made in his life, Meghan Markle is the worst thing that's ever happened to him. In my view, his life has changed immeasurably for the worst since they met. Now, they've got a beautiful young family, and I wish the 4 of them well. But Harry before Meghan and Harry after Meghan are barely recognisable as the same human being. It's just my impression, but Harry these days cuts a desolate figure, joyless, bored, sad, lost. Now he really is a spare. It's obvious to me that life in woke California doesn't suit him. He should be necking beers tonight with his old army mates following a robust game of polo. Since that fateful day when he was introduced to Meghan Markle, he has walked away from his family, his friends and his country. And if you think that's a good outcome as he enters his 4th decade, then you're living in La La Land just like the Sussexes themselves. What Meghan wants is what Meghan gets, and she's got everything. She bagged a prince. She's now one of the most famous women in the world. Rich beyond belief, with the world at her expensively pedicured feet. Harry, on the other hand, is a haunted shadow of his former self, picking needless fights with the British press and moaning about his terrible life in his reportedly 16-bathroom Montecito mansion. Now, one gripe he has that I do agree with is that he should have full royal protection when in the UK. Why? Because he didn't choose to be the King's son. So where do we go from here? Well, if Harry has spent the last 4 decades destroying his family, he needs to spend the next 4 rebuilding it. Blood is thicker than water, and I believe the family and even the British people will forgive Harry's indiscretions. But I doubt that anything will change whilst he remains in a relationship that looks to me more like a hostage situation than a marriage. And it certainly won't happen without a sincere and deep apology from the prince to his family, his friends and his country. But I won't hold my breath because for this entitled young man, sorry seems to be the hardest word. The Duke of Sussex turns 40 today, but you could hardly call it a happy birthday. Harry at 40, your verdict. GBnews.com/your say. First up, tonight's top pundits. Former Brexit Party MEP Annunziata Rees-Mogg, Conservative peer and former advisor to Boris Johnson, Lord Coolvere Ranger, and former top Labour insider Paul Richards. Great to see all 3 of you. Coolvere, if I could start with you. Harry at 40, your verdict.
It's a big milestone, isn't it, Mark? And I think you did a lot of looking back there in your monologue, and it's hard to disagree with a lot of what you said there. But I was pleased to see today that on what was Twitter, now called X or something, that the royal family and the Prince and Princess of Wales wished Harry a happy birthday. Now, that's the first time since 2001 that they have done that. Now, to some people, that doesn't mean anything. But for those of us on social media that think the world is run by social media and any small smidgen of a tweet or a twat or whatever it is out there means a lot, I think that meant something. So, as someone who's coming to the end of his 40s and I look at the last decade, as a man, it's a time when you've done a lot in your past, but now you're probably going to really use the experience, look after your family, look forward and do those big things probably in your life, which is where Harry enters this decade. So I'm hoping that means bridges to be built, Invictus Games to be delivered, and more of a sort of mature approach to all the challenges that he does quite obviously face.
Annunziata, he will be celebrating one aspect of his birthday, and that's the inheritance of a reported £8 million from the late Queen Mother. Do you think she would be so generous if she'd known what he's been up to since her passing?
I think she fundamentally believed in family, and I doubt that his behaviour would have changed her devotion and dedication to her family. I don't know how much he'll be celebrating if the reports that Meghan was disappointed by how badly off he was are true. But I'd like to take this opportunity to wish him a happy birthday.
Hear, hear.
But I think he has got to realise as he cuts into his birthday cake that you can't have your cake and eat it. That if he wants to be a working royal, he has to work. If he wants to have privacy, he needs to be private. He is expecting everyone to bow to his will. Life is give and take. I think it's his turn to build bridges with his own family and otherwise be quiet, keep his privacy and leave us all alone.
Paul Richards, the Duke of Sussex turns 40, but it doesn't feel like a happy birthday, does it?
No, I mean, I would take the royals out of our constitution completely if I was given the right to do so, but I recognise the public is not where I am on this. And I think if you are going to have a royal family, they have to have a sense of duty and service. I think he should look to his own father's example, the Prince's Trust, the environmental campaigns, the, big interventions on architecture and all these things, and learn that you
Not always welcome, Paul.
Not always welcome, but it can be used as a platform for good. And I think Charles does show that you can do things for good with this role. But he seems to be just a prisoner of his past. He can't transcend his position and do good with it, and he seems like quite an angry young man.
Indeed. Your reaction to Harry at 40. Would you welcome him back to this country with open arms? Let me know your thoughts. gbnews.com/your say. Developing tonight following an assassination attempt on the 13th of July, which saw him almost killed. Gunshots have been fired in Donald Trump's vicinity at the former president's golf club in Florida. We'll bring you more on this very shortly. Now, this is a real shocker, I've got to say, because we've definitely heard reports of gunfire. We'll bring you the latest. Now, Secret Service actually opened fire at a suspected person with a weapon while Donald Trump was golfing. This according to AP reports citing law enforcement sources. We'll get more on this. Live reaction next. Plus, are Labour about to adopt a Rwanda-style plan in Albania? More on this development following more deaths in the Channel. See you in tea.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Good morning, everybody. I honestly don't think Gen Z are as lazy as we've been made out. I was on GB News a couple of months ago talking about a report which suggested that they were very lazy, very work shy, and I honestly don't think that's the case. I respect my elders, so I'm certainly not going to sit here and blame them for the slow return to many offices across the country. But I am actually 20. I've run businesses since I was 15 and 16, since I dropped out of school, and I have always been pro-office, right? So I fit right into that Generation Z category, and I think the office environment is fantastic, not just professionally but socially for young people, especially kind of after COVID, and it halted a lot of their social plans or people going to university, etc. I think getting people into the office, being surrounded by the more senior people, the people with more experience, which is what we're talking about, older people, is actually incredibly positive. But I think Generation Z get a lot of stick in the media, and I'm often sat here debating this about them being called lazy. I guess I think probably what's different is technology is advanced, so people's jobs are a lot quicker, and Generation Z have obviously grew up with that technology, therefore in a position to do jobs quicker. And I guess that's kind of where that kind of narrative has come from, because Gen Z did really kind of go with the whole work smarter, not harder kind of mentality, which is often met with a little bit of stick.
I'm not knocking the young generation at all. I mean, I'm just saying it's by experience. Undoubtedly, they're not as hard-working as the more experienced worker, but I'm certainly not knocking them on that basis. If they had the opportunity, I'm sure there'd be more and more would want to get into the workplace. But unfortunately, I think this COVID has changed the world, and it's made younger people more lazy than older people. Older people just can't wait to, well, shouldn't say that, can't wait to get out of the house to get to work.
GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. If you're just joining us, following an assassination attempt on the 13th of July, which saw him almost killed, gunshots have been fired in Donald Trump's vicinity at the former president's golf club in Florida. Now, we've got an update on this. Secret Service opened fire at a suspected person with a weapon while Trump was golfing. AP reports citing law enforcement sources. Now, the New York Post earlier said that it was an isolated incident outside of the golf club, not related to Donald Trump. But speculation is now growing that Trump may have been the target. We can't confirm that. But scenes of chaos at what must surely go down as one of the most controversial election races in the history of US politics. So that's the latest we've got. Trump is safe, by the way. He said, I'm absolutely fine. Let's have a look at this, the latest. Donald Trump says, I'm safe following gunshots in my vicinity. No further details available. However, the Washington Post and other outlets were reporting the incident. Trump is safe following gunshots in his vicinity. A statement from his team says. Let's get the views now of US political analyst Roger Giewald. Roger, thank you for joining us. You've met Donald Trump. We don't have much detail here, but suffice to say that he needs that security protection more than ever.
Yes, I think assassination of Trump is one of the biggest threats that the Western world faces right now. We don't know what's happened here. You know, shots in the vicinity in a place like West Palm Beach and outside his golf course, which is on a very wide main road with all sorts of fields and other things around it. It could be anything, but when we hear that Secret Service returned fire, that escalates it into a whole different story, and we obviously need more details.
Most definitely. I understand, according to NBC, a person is being questioned in connection with the gunshots reported near Trump International Golf Course in Florida. Citing 3 senior law enforcement officials. Investigators are trying to confirm whether or not a gun was found in the bushes near the golf course where the former president was playing. The bottom line is this man is a target, and he always will be.
Absolutely. Well, any president is a target, but somebody as controversial as Trump in this polarized climate that we find ourselves in is especially a target, and it's happened once. I mean, they are saying that Iran would do anything to get rid of him. There's all sorts of people who might want him gone, and he just really needs to be very careful. I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see him going around in a Perspex Pope-mobile pretty soon.
Indeed, although he will still want to have access to the public because he's very much pitching himself as the people's president, isn't he?
He's not pitching himself. He is. I mean, when you're with him, it overflows. I mean, he can't get enough of meeting people and talking. And when he speaks to you, you think you're the only person in the room. And it's going to be very hard for him to give that up and live behind a shuttered atmosphere. And, you know, he lives at Mar-a-Lago, but my view is that the golf course is his favorite place. So for this to happen near there, I'm sure must be very upsetting to him.
If this was an attempt on his life for the second time in a matter of months, will this affect the president mentally, do you think?
No, I don't think it will. I think he knows. I think he's a realist. He's a man who's been in business for many decades. He's had his ups and his downs. He's a very tough guy. The key word to describe Donald Trump, as one of his closest advisors, a friend of mine says, is resilience. So I think this will just strengthen his resolve.
Indeed. And obviously following that assassination attempt, he got back up on his feet at the podium and he just said, fight, fight, fight. He won plaudits for his brave reaction to that attempted assassination. Do you think if this latest incident was targeted at him, that it will have political implications?
Yeah, I mean, I think it will just, convince the people who support Trump that there's a real danger that the enemy is seriously after him. And the people who don't support Trump will, the ones who are not very nice will probably be sorry it didn't happen. And the other ones probably won't show much sympathy. But he just needs to be very, very careful because he is a target and he's so important to the world. You know, and the more we see Kamala with her movie star status after 5 minutes after nobody wanted to endorse her, because that's all the Democrats have got, the more the opposition to Trump can grow in certain quarters.
Indeed. I've got the latest now from Donald Trump. Donald Trump has said he will never surrender in his first post after gunshots were reported in his vicinity whilst golfing at Trump International Golf Course in Florida. Never surrender. That'll be the message and the mantra in the weeks ahead, won't it? Here are live pictures, by the way, if you're just joining us. Gunfire in the vicinity of Donald Trump whilst playing golf in Florida. He's not been injured in any way, but that looks like some kind of convoy, judging by those live pictures. But the latest from Donald Trump, very much in character, we will never surrender. His first post after this latest incident, and that will be the mantra of the campaign going forward, Roger.
Well, more than that, Mark, we are now. I'm on another program in a few hours where I know they want to ask me what is the greatest threat to America, to the world, to the West. And I've just revised what I was going to say, because the greatest threat now is those people, starting with the heads of NATO, who think it's fine to start firing missiles into Russia. That will produce World War I in 3 minutes.
World War III, yeah.
World War III, I'm sorry, World War III in 3 minutes.
You're not that old, Roger.
Who would you want negotiating with Putin? Would you want Trump or would you want Kamala Harris?
Well, of course, Trump certainly didn't start any wars whilst president, which is in itself quite unique historically. Look, I'm going to put a very blunt question to you, Roger, and it might be a tough question to answer because you've met Trump, you've spent time in his company. But do you fear that Donald Trump could be killed before November?
Yeah, I think it's a definite possibility, and it scares me, and it scares a lot of other people. I mean, nobody is safe in his position, and you know, I don't know, other than I say a Perspex Pokemobile, I don't know what he can do, but he likes to play golf most days of the week, many days of the week. And as you said, he loves to get out there and be with his public. So he's exposed. Yes, it's a definite possibility. And it's very frightening. And I am old enough to remember Kennedy, JFK being killed. And the world went into a period of depression for almost 6 months. It would be a horrible thing to have to go through. And Kennedy was not divisive and controversial.
Most definitely. Now, Vice President Kamala Harris, of course, the Democrats' nominee to face Donald Trump for the race for the White House, says she's glad her presidential rival Donald Trump is safe after gunshots were heard in his vicinity. Violence has no place in America, Ms. Harris has said on X. Now, Roger, do you think the tone of the debate and the race for the presidency has imperiled the likes of Donald Trump, particularly the way that the media and Trump's opponents have reported it?
No, I don't think that. I don't think it's imperiled him. It's good old American political debate and argument. The ABC interview was clearly rigged in some ways, and many people say he never should have agreed. His people never should have agreed to it. But I don't think it's imperiled him. It's just, look, it's all rhetoric. Both of these candidates have got a long history and track record from which we can judge how they would do as next president, together with their performance today. So that debate was just one snippet of rhetoric. I don't think it's going to change anything in itself.
My thanks to US political analyst and a man that spent time with Donald Trump in the past, Roger Galb. Thank you, Roger. Well, if you're just joining us, gunfire has been heard in the vicinity of President Donald Trump as he played golf at his golf course in Florida. That's right, gunshots heard in the vicinity. We don't know whether Trump was targeted, but it looks to be a serious situation. This is live pictures now of a press conference. We're hoping to get more detail on just exactly what happened, how many people might have been involved. Was Donald Trump the target of this incident? Where are the alleged perpetrators right now? What we can tell you for sure is that Donald Trump is safe. He's not been shot. He's not been injured. And he has just spoken to his legions of fans and said he will never surrender. He said, there were gunshots in my vicinity, but before rumours start spiralling out of control, I wanted you to hear this first. I am safe and well. He goes on, nothing will slow me down. I will never surrender. He goes on, I will always love you for supporting me. Unity, peace, and of course, he repeats that mantra, his great political slogan, make America great again. OK, we'll bring you that press conference when it begins. If you're just joining us there, that is a significant development in the race for the White House. Gunshot heard in the vicinity of Donald Trump whilst he played golf at his own golf course. We will bring you more on that very, very shortly. So, folks, a very busy show. Don't forget, at 10, a growing sleaze crisis for Sir Keir Starmer. But next up, folks, what a story we've got for you. This is quite extraordinary. In a Mark Dolan Tonight exclusive, I'll be joined live in the studio by a woman violently attacked by a hammer-wielding thug last year, who was released early under the early release scheme. He came out this week after 6 months of his 3-year sentence. She's furious, and she tells her extraordinary story next.
Hello, good evening and welcome to your GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. Well, we've got high pressure dominating the weather this week, which means plenty of fine and dry weather and plenty of autumnal sunshine too to enjoy next week. To finish off Sunday, though, we do have this cold front which is slowly moving its way towards the southeast of the country, so plenty of cloud here and some rain and drizzle. Through into the evening, though, although still plenty of cloud across the south, that rain and drizzle will eventually fizzle out, and that means a milder night across the south compared to those recent nights. To the north of this, though, plenty of clear skies and light winds, which means it's going to be feeling much chillier and likely to see plenty of mist and fog overnight too, particularly in the northwest of England and Wales, where we do have a yellow fog warning issued. Otherwise, though, to start Monday, there will be plenty of bright sunshine, and that mist and fog will generally dissipate fairly quickly through the course of the morning. Once again, across Northern Ireland, through into the Scottish borders, plenty of bright sunshine, those mist and fog patches and rural spots. That fog may just be a little bit dense where we do have the warning issued, so do be careful for the Monday morning commute. And any cloud across the south will kind of lift and break through the course of the morning, and that does allow plenty of sunshine to develop across most of the country, so plenty of that warm sunshine to start the new working week. Just a build of higher cloud into the northwest through into the afternoon, perhaps some rain and drizzle towards the Outer Hebrides, but otherwise plenty of warm sunshine, highs of 22 Celsius down to the south. Now, heading into Tuesday, that high pressure is still dominating the weather, so still plenty of fine and dry conditions after a chilly start. That cloud will continue to build in the northwest, and we may see some outbreaks of rain and drizzle to the far north. But as we head into next week, still plenty of that fine and dry weather around, just feeling a little bit chilly overnight. Bye for now.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Now developing tonight following an assassination attempt on the 13th of July, which saw him almost killed. Gunshots have been fired in Donald Trump's vicinity at the former president's golf club in Florida. So Trump is playing golf. We know he's a golf enthusiast. Gunfire was heard. Now, the latest we've got is that the Secret Service opened fire at a suspected person with a weapon. This is all playing out as Donald Trump played golf. The golf club was placed into lockdown, and Trump was essentially sort of shuffled out of the way to protect his life. Now, this is the potentially second attempt on his life in a matter of months. It's one of the most bitter races for the White House in US political history, but it's looking like one of the most dangerous as well. We've got live pictures now of an expected press conference when we hope to hear from law enforcement about what happened, who's involved. And what I can tell you for sure in concrete terms is that Trump is okay. And he's issued a statement, a characteristically bullish statement, saying that we will never surrender. There it is. There were, says Donald Trump, gunshots in my vicinity, but before rumours start spiralling out of control, I wanted you to hear their very first from me that I'm safe and well. He goes on, nothing will slow me down. I will never surrender. I will always love you for supporting me. Unity, peace, and make America great again. Now, I've got a really important interview coming up. However, if that press conference starts, I will interrupt the interview to bring you the latest on this developing story. But first, in a Mark Dolan Tonight exclusive, Claudia Bryan was attacked by hammer-wielding thugs who robbed her and her 70-year-old female friend last year. Well, they were caught and sentenced this year to 3 years in prison. Claudia has since been informed by the probation service that the main perpetrator, an Albanian man, was released just days ago. Now, Claudia, I'm delighted that you've joined us in the studio, and I'm so sorry for your ordeal. First of all, your emotions when you heard the news that this awful criminal is free to walk the streets again.
I was mortified, and I could not believe that the government would have a policy. This gentleman, if for want of a better word, gentleman, had served 6 months of a 3-year sentence for holding a hammer over my 70-year-old friend's head. I jumped out of a 2-story building to call the police, hanging by the window, and it was horrifying. He also had 3 accomplices with him. Yeah. They got community service. Now, to hear that he's been released after 6 months, after putting a hammer over my 70-year-old friend's head to rob us of mobile phones and laptops.
Well, if it's not too painful for you, are you able to give us sort of the background to this awful attack? So your friend, she's 70 years of age.
She's 70 years of age.
Is she walking down the streets?
No, sir. We were in an apartment. We'd rented a lovely Airbnb where we were going to look at the sites in Kent.
Right.
And we were sitting there. It was a beautiful evening.
So you're in the apartment?
Correct. Beautiful evening, September. We were sitting having a cup of tea and there was a knock at the door. I went to the door, did not open the door. This voice said to me that he was looking for an Adrian. I said that I don't know any Adrian and that it was just myself and my female friend there. He proceeded to kick the door in. I ran, grabbed my mobile phone and started to phone the police.
Yeah.
He came in with a hammer, 2 other gentlemen with him with a dog, and they held a hammer over my 70-year-old friend's head, threatening to kill us, and that they were looking for this other person that we did not know. So I managed to get the police there. They were apprehended, thankfully.
How quickly did the police come?
Half an hour. So
you had this ordeal for 30 minutes?
Correct.
And were you essentially being held captive at that point?
I was actually hanging outside of a window. My legs
was that
dangling.
an attempted escape on your part?
Yes, but also to contact the police because I didn't want him to get my mobile phone while I was on the phone with the police. And I was describing him to the police. I was about a few yards away, could see them, could describe the hammer, could describe the attacker. And my friend just had her hands up and she was just begging them not to hurt us.
And were the assailants still on the scene when the police arrived?
No, they'd actually gone away in a car, and luckily a witness on the street had got the reg number of the car.
Right. What kind of impact has this had on you and your friend?
This has been awful. Both of us have suffered PTSD. If you hear a door bang when we're out in the street shopping or in a mall shopping, we find ourselves being extremely nervous and looking around. And if someone has spatial awareness issues with us, coming close to us, we find ourselves suffering, and particularly my 70-year-old friend. She has nightmares. We've been staying together since. I've been looking after her, and she has nightmares. She wakes up screaming. We honestly believe that that day they were going to kill us.
And what were your emotions when you took that call? This week, was it?
Correct.
This
On Monday.
being released early.
Correct.
The phone rang and it was
yeah,
probation
it was
service?
Probation service. A very nice lady explained to me that she was sorry to inform us that this person had been released, and we were to understand that he was now on licence and had a tag. It's in an area where we live, so he is quite close by. While we don't know this person, we do know that he would, of course, recognise us should we be at a local shopping centre or anything like that. And it's been quite frightening. We haven't wanted to go out. We haven't wanted to go to our local coffee shops because we don't know if this person would recognise us again. I have to say that the police were incredibly proactive, and they were good. Probation assured me that this person does not know my name or her name and won't be able to find us, but we do know the area in which he frequents.
And how about you? How have you been feeling since the attack?
I'm nervous. I feel that the government doesn't realise women like ourselves, or other victims, male victims as well, when you release these sorts of people back onto the streets, I am confident that this person will do it again, and I'm also confident that they probably the next time might hurt somebody.
Yeah, did this person seem intent on violence?
Absolutely.
Did they look like they were willing to use that hammer?
100%.
Not an amateur?
No, this man was not coming to knock nails in our wall. He was certainly angry. He was looking for a particular individual. We have subsequently found out that they also caught the other individual that he was looking for. So it was a county drugs line incident.
And was it a case of mistaken identity or the wrong address?
He had the wrong address, and he just kicked the door down.
It just shows you the dark underbelly of violence in our country, doesn't it? What's your appraisal of this government policy to release 1,500 to 2,000 people early?
I'm furious. I'm absolutely furious. There are a lot of victims out there that are now concerned for their safety. There are particularly women that are out there that have had incidents happen to them, and I worry for our communities and for our safety. So I think that the government needs to rethink this policy and address it.
Indeed. You're South African, aren't you?
Correct.
And I would suggest perhaps that South Africa has quite a long history.
We are immune to violence in South Africa. However, we are able to protect ourselves by owning a gun. Here in the UK, one cannot protect oneself. I have lived in the UK for 28 years, so I am not immune to that level of violence no longer. And so when it happened, my instinct said that I had to escape from the situation, therefore throwing myself out of a 2-story building.
And how is your friend right now? I mean, you said she's getting flashbacks and all the rest of it.
She is.
Has it affected her health?
Yes, and her mental health in particular. She's lost a lot of weight. She's lost 3 stone in weight since the incident, and she finds it very challenging to just do daily tasks. So I've been taking care of her since.
Is Britain becoming more dangerous, do you think?
It is indeed. I see a pattern. I see that we perhaps need to start to look at our police force.
More police or different policies?
I would say different policies, different training, maybe. These criminals that are here now are very different to perhaps what the British public is used to, and the level of violence is certainly going to go up.
So are you sort of intimating the issue of foreign-born nationals who commit crimes?
Correct. This gentleman was Albanian. The others, there was one Indigenous English person. The others were all foreign.
Well, can I thank you for your courage in speaking out?
Thank you, Mark.
And your generosity in telling me and my viewers and listeners your story.
And I do hope the government rethinks this policy. So thank you for your time.
We all do. My best wishes to you and your dear friend as well. If she's watching, then we wish her well and a continued recovery from what is clearly an emotional and physical trauma. My thanks there to Claudia Bryan. What a story. Well, if you're just joining us following an assassination attempt on the 13th of July, which saw him almost killed, gunshots have been fired in Donald Trump's vicinity at the former president's golf club in Florida. Well, the latest is that the Secret Service have opened fire at a suspected person. Donald Trump is fine. He's safe. And the golf club was placed into lockdown. And I can tell you that he's come out fighting, as he did on the 13th of July, with a strong message to his supporters: "We will never surrender." Now, if you're just watching our television output, you'll see live pictures of an expected press conference from law enforcement so we can find out who's involved, what exactly happened, and also the ongoing circumstances of this case. You know, has someone been arrested? Does Donald Trump still face some kind of threat? Was he a target in the first place? We can't say that definitively at this stage, but someone's just popped in there at that press conference just to test the microphone. But we're going to stay on this story for the duration of the show. Of course, we won't go away from it very far. But next up, my Mark Meets guest is the respected Conservative MP Greg Smith. He'll be commenting on what looks to be a potential shooting incident involving Donald Trump. He'll also be telling me why James Cleverly's Shadow Home Secretary is his pick for next Tory leader. See you in 2.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Did you know several Paralympic GB track and field athletes are aiming to go for gold this summer in Paris? So aside from pure talent, a British firm has incorporated, get this, space technology in the materials of running clothes to help athletes perform at their ultimate capacity. I'm not sure if I believe this, but we'll find out in a sec. Trailblazing scientists, engineers and designers at British firm Rheon Labs have taken an idea first used in a NASA project, and they've now developed it for over 15 years at Imperial College in London.
First of all, please can you explain to us a bit more about how and what this incredible technology is?
Yeah, well, as you mentioned, our founder, Dr. Dan Plant, spent many years developing these kind of dynamic materials. That means they behave in what's called non-Newtonic way. So they don't follow the rules. Effectively, they can change their behavior depending on kind of stress or stretch you apply to it. So what you get on an athlete level, if you imagine you have a garment, it's supercharged. It's such that the garment changes its support depending on your movement or your activity or the speed at which you run.
So you're saying that it generates what, more sort of kinetic energy? Is that right?
Not quite. It makes you effectively make more out of your own energy. Spot the athletes with the wavy curves and stripes, you'll see that. So that's super polymer we have in combination with these stripes that are kind of built around the way your muscles moves.
You said the difference between first and fourth place is a fraction of a percent.
Yeah, that's the very main difference it makes. So even if you manage to kind of make more of your own energy and improve your performance by 1%, that's the difference between podium and non-podium.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, though.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Now developing this evening following an assassination attempt on the 13th of July, which saw Donald Trump almost killed. We were on air here at GB News and Mark Dolan tonight when that happened. Well, gunshots have been fired in Donald Trump's vicinity at his golf club in Florida. Live pictures now of an expected press conference from law enforcement and a very characteristically robust statement from Donald Trump. Don't forget, when he faced that assassination attempt, he was back on his feet at the podium in front of a crowd of thousands, saying, "Fight, fight, fight." Well, the message remains just as defiant this evening. Here's the following message from Donald Trump. He said he'll never surrender. That's right. Here's the full statement. "There were," he says, "gunshots in my vicinity, but before rumours start spiralling out of control. I wanted you to hear this first. I'm safe and well. Trump goes on, nothing will slow me down. I will never surrender. I will always love you for supporting me. Unity, peace, make America great again. So, just to recap, gunfire heard in the vicinity of Donald Trump. That's got to be extremely nerve-wracking for him. I understand that the golf course went into complete lockdown. He was ushered away to safety in what must have had uncomfortable echoes of what happened in July. Clearly, he's a target, one of the most famous men in the world. He wants to be president again, and we're expecting a press conference in just a moment. But first, we're going to talk about James Cleverly, and we will in just a second. But I'm joined by my Mark Meets guest, Conservative MP for Mid-Buckinghamshire, Greg Smith. Mr. Smith, thank you so much for joining us. In the interest of democracy, all candidates for election need to be safe. This is a worrying development, isn't it?
It is, and it's extremely concerning just a couple of months after we saw those equally horrific scenes where Donald Trump was shot, thankfully not fatally, and he got back and made those remarks at his rally before receiving treatment. It is unacceptable to see violence in any way, shape or form at all, let alone as to try and manipulate, influence, change the democratic process. Our great friends over the pond in America need to have a safe election where they choose their next president without these sort of tactics taking place. And I hope that the Secret Service and the US authorities take even more steps to keep both candidates in that election safe through to November.
If anything were to happen to Donald Trump or his opponent Kamala Harris, it would be a dark day for America and a dark day for the world, wouldn't it? A dark day for the free world and democracy.
Absolutely. This transcends simply our friends in the United States. This would be an attack on democracy as a principle, as a value, something that we in the United Kingdom hold as dear as those in the United States do and other countries around the world. We cannot allow this sort of intimidation, violence, potential for murder. It impacts the democratic process.
Most definitely. Listen, we've invited you on to talk about the Tory leadership, another key election race that people are watching with considerable interest. Why does James Cleverly have your vote?
It's for many reasons. First and foremost, though, there's no sugarcoating it. We had the most almighty kicking in the general election in July. And if we are to re-earn the right to be heard, if we are to be able to set out a package before the next general election that's going to excite people about the Conservatives, we've got to unite. Because in my constituency, like many others, the number one thing that came up on the doorsteps was you lot are fighting amongst yourselves. You're not putting up a single front. You're all over the show. And James is someone that's pulling support in from all wings of the party. All political parties are grand coalitions, but he's pulling in support from all wings of the party, and I think he's the best placed candidate to unite us, as well as setting out a pitch that chimes with my sort of conservatism. The way he talks about some of our great successes in recent decades, Canary Wharf, the Olympic Park, what's happening in Teesside at the moment, is all a result of when you get the state out of the way, when you deregulate, when you trust businesses and local communities to just get on with it. And it's things like that that have made me come to the conclusion that he's got my support. He had my vote last Tuesday and will continue to get it for the rest of this campaign.
Briefly, Greg Smith, it's quite interesting, isn't it, what's happening in UK politics? 4.1 million people voted for Reform UK in July. Would James Cleverly, as leader of the Conservatives, do a pre-election deal with Nigel Farage?
No, he's said that we can't get into mergers or anything like that. 5 years is a long time away, though. We don't know what the state of reform will be, or whether there's yet another reincarnation of UKIP come Brexit Party come reform by that point. It's clear that Reform had a very good night in the general election. 4 million votes is a big achievement for a new party, but we're the Conservative Party, and we've got to set out a pitch based on Conservative values, recreating ourselves as a Conservative force once again to go into the next general election with a mind to winning it and ridding the country of this already terrible Labour government.
Greg Smith, it's been a delight to have you on the show. I wish we had longer, but thank you for sharing your thoughts on James Cleverly as the best candidate to lead the Conservatives into the next election.
Thank you.
Now, if you're just joining us, we do have a development on the Trump story. Gunfire has been heard in the vicinity of Donald Trump. The latest is that the FBI are considering this to be a potential assassination attempt. Now, that's a big story because at first the press was saying that it was incidental, that the gunfire was not related to Trump, it was outside of the golf club. But the plot thickens. A worrying assault on democracy and on the free world. We'll bring you more on this developing story in the next hour. Don't go anywhere for the Trump shooting latest.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good evening and welcome to your GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. Well, we've got high pressure dominating the weather this week, which means plenty of fine and dry weather and plenty of autumnal sunshine too to enjoy next week. To finish off Sunday, though, we do have this cold front which is slowly moving its way towards the southeast of the country, so plenty of cloud here and some rain and drizzle. Through into the evening, though, although still plenty of cloud across the south, that rain and drizzle will eventually fizzle out, and that means a milder night across the south compared to those recent nights. To the north of this, though, plenty of clear skies and light winds, which means it's going to be feeling much chillier and likely to see plenty of mist and fog overnight too, particularly in the northwest of England and Wales, where we do have a yellow fog warning issued. Otherwise, though, to start Monday, there will be plenty of bright sunshine and that mist and fog will generally dissipate fairly quickly through the course of the morning. Once again, across Northern Ireland, through into the Scottish borders, plenty of bright sunshine, those mist and fog patches and rural spots. That fog may just be a little bit dense where we do have the warning issued, so do be careful for the Monday morning commute. And any cloud across the south will kind of lift and break through the course of the morning, and that does allow plenty of sunshine to develop across most of the country, so plenty of that warm sunshine to start the new working week. Just a build of higher cloud into the northwest through into the afternoon, perhaps some rain and drizzle towards the Outer Hebrides, but otherwise plenty of warm sunshine, highs of 22 Celsius down to the south. Now, heading into Tuesday, that high pressure is still dominating the weather, so still plenty of fine and dry conditions after a chilly start. That cloud will continue to build in the northwest, and we may see some outbreaks of rain and drizzle to the far north. But as we head into next week, still plenty of that fine and dry weather around, just feeling a little bit chilly overnight. Bye for now.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
This is your channel. It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tune in to Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. GB News royalty with your perfect start to the weekend. Lucky us. Feisty and fearless guests.
Well, I'm a normal person, so ask me.
Honest opinions that raises more questions than a Gary Barlow tax return. And a few surprises along the way. Might be cold in this studio. That is Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. 8 to 9, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates.
You're comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister.
Which is it? Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained. I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
It's 10 o'clock on television, on radio and online in the United Kingdom and across the world. This is Mark Dolan Tonight. If you're just joining us now following an assassination attempt on the 13th of July, which saw him almost killed, gunshots have been fired in Donald Trump's vicinity at the former president's golf club. Here's the press conference live.
And because of this, we're not going to go there, all right? So keep that in mind, and we'll be good. So here we go. All right, 1:30 this afternoon. Call came out, shots fired. That was called in by the Secret Service. Because we're in constant contact with them all the time, we were notified of that, and we had units here that immediately sealed off the area. Fortunately, we were able to locate a witness that came to us and said, hey, I saw the guy running out of the bushes. He jumped into a black Nissan, and I took a picture of the vehicle and the tag, which was great. So we had that information. Our real-time crime center put it out to the license plate readers. And we were able to get a hit on that vehicle on I-95 as it was headed into Martin County. We got a hold of Martin County Sheriff's Office, alerted them, and they spotted the vehicle and pulled it over and detained the guy. After that, we took the the witness that witnessed the incident, flew him up there, and he identified as the person that he saw running out of the bushes and jumped into the car. Now, in the bushes where this guy was is a AK-47 style rifle with a scope, 2 backpacks which were hung on the fence that had ceramic tile in them, and a GoPro, which he was going to take pictures of. So those are being processed right now. The Secret Service agent that was on the course did a fantastic job. What they do is they have an agent that jumps one hole ahead of time to where the president was at. And he was able to spot this rifle barrel sticking out of the fence and immediately engage that individual, at which time the individual took off. So that's what we know about the investigation. We have somebody in custody right now that is a potential suspect. We got a little bit more work to do on it, but as we usually do, as soon as we decide that we're going to book him into the county jail and the charges that he's going to be booked into, we'll get those to you and we'll get a picture of him and we'll get you his background. So now I'm going to turn it over to the representative of the Secret Service, and he's going to make a brief statement.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I first want to thank all of our law enforcement partners, to include the Palm Beach Sheriff's Office and the Martin County Sheriff's Office, for their involvement today. Former President Donald Trump is safe and unharmed following a protective incident shortly before 2 p.m. on Sunday at Trump International Golf Club at West Palm Beach. The U.S. Secret Service personnel opened fire on a gunman located near the property line, and this matter is under investigation. I'll turn it over to my partners over at the FBI.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jeffrey Veltri. I'm the special agent in charge of the FBI's Miami field office. The FBI has assumed the role as the lead federal law enforcement agency in the investigation of the incident that occurred earlier today at Trump International Golf Course here in West Palm Beach, Florida. We've deployed a number of resources, including investigative teams, crisis response team members, bomb technicians, and evidence response team members as well. What we need right now is for the public to avoid the area around the golf course. We will continue to support this investigation with the full resources of the FBI, alongside our partners with the United States Secret Service and the Palm Beach Sheriff's Office, as well as Martin County Sheriff's Office and state and local law enforcement. I would ask that if anyone has any information that may assist with this investigation, to contact our tip line at 1-800-CALL-FBI or at tips, that's TIPS, .fbi.gov. Thank you.
David? Hi, I'm Dave Ehrenberg, State Attorney for Palm Beach County. I want to thank Sheriff Bradshaw and our partners at the local, state, and federal levels. I'm here because our prosecutors are currently working up warrants and a motion for pretrial detention for the suspect. In that way, he will be kept in custody. But our filing of these warrants and charges at the state level does not preclude federal charges that could be coming. But in the meantime, it looks like the warrants and the pretrial detention motion will happen first. And again, I want to thank the cooperation we've had with our federal partners and at the local level. And thank you all for being here today.
Okay, we're going to make these pictures available to you. It'll show you a picture of the backpack and the rifle. And there's also a GoPro on the fence there where he was intent on filming what was going on. Even though we're going to have to secure a couple areas around the golf course here, the public doesn't need to panic. We know that we got a post office, a library, and a school down the street. So we'll make it convenient for you to get to all the places you need to go, get your kids to school, get them over here to the post office or wherever else you need to go. It's safe. There's no more danger here, and we'll make it very convenient for you. So having said that, we're going to take a very limited amount of questions, and you can direct them to who you want to answer the question.
Sure. Did this individual make any statements as he was being detained?
No statement right now as far as his involvement in the incident, and there's further investigation to be completed.
What was his demeanor like?
Yeah, I'm not sure if maybe the Secret Service gentleman answered. I misunderstood, or I couldn't quite understand. So there was a rifle. So one of your agents saw on the golf course saw a rifle pointing to a fence. Was it a chain link? Okay, so he saw that, the agent.
That is correct. Yes.
And the president or former president was on the course behind him. How close?
It was 1 or 2 holes behind. That because the bubble moves through the golf course, so our agents will get there first, clear it. He noticed that the rifle was pointed out. Our agents engaged. We are not sure right now if the individual was able to take a shot at our agents, but for sure our agents were able to engage with the subject. I don't know that. Doesn't appear so.
Is there a moment?
Yep. Now,
how far away was the president? How far away was Donald Trump when this gentleman was caught and stopped?
Probably between 300 and 500 yards, but with a rifle and a scope like that, that's not a long distance.
For the Secret Service, how far was your agent from the would-be assailant?
That I'm not sure right now. We're still looking into it.
Reports of the 4 rounds of ammunition were fired. Were all 4 of those from your agent?
That is correct. 4 to 6. We're not sure yet.
Was there a long distance? Explain why.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
WPBF 25. I was wondering what how this was able to happen, and for future reference, is there any up security in the golf course?
I didn't hear all that. Say that one more time and talk up a little bit.
So how was this able to happen, and for future reference, is there any up security in the golf course?
Well, you got to understand the golf course is surrounded by shrubbery, so when somebody gets into the shrubbery, they're pretty much out of sight. All right, and at this level that he is at right now, he's not the sitting president. If he was, we would have had this entire golf course around it. But because he's not, the security is limited to the areas that the Secret Service deems possible. So I would imagine that the next time he comes to the golf course, there'll probably be a little bit more people around the perimeter. But the Secret Service did exactly what they should have done. They provided exactly what the protection should have been, and their agent did a fantastic job.
Which direction was the shrubbery where he was? North, south? I guess east, west, south is the road?
The layout of the golf course, you've got 3 holes, 5, 6, and 7. All right? One of them runs parallel to Summit Boulevard. One of them runs parallel to Congress. and he was in an area in the shrubbery where he could see both holes. So the president was another hole back, which means he's about between 400 and 500 yards away.
So he was on the golf course?
Oh, he's on the golf course, yeah, but he's back a ways.
For the Secret Service, have you guys changed at all the way that you guys are protecting former President Donald Trump? This is now a potential second attempt on him. Can you just elaborate on how things have changed and what you make of all this?
Yes, the threat level is high. We have increased the amount of assets that we've supported, so we live in danger times. So yes.
We're done with questions right now. There's really nothing more for us to add. I just want to tell you, the Secret Service and the FBI and the State Attorney's Office have been fantastic to work with. And I can tell you right now, our agency with this real-time crime center was fabulous. That's how we got the guy. We started out with, we don't know anything, to where we had a tag, we had a vehicle description, and we got an area where we saw the person. So be proud of your law enforcement. All right, thanks, folks. We'll get back to you.
Where on 95 was it that?
Yeah, she'll get the photos to you.
Well, it was just a few weeks ago on the 13th of July that I'd finished Mark Dolan Tonight that evening. I got a call from the boss saying you need to get back on air because somebody has tried to assassinate Donald Trump. Here we go again. Now, former President Trump says he's safe and well following gunshots in his vicinity at his golf course in Florida. The FBI significantly says it's investigating what appears to be an attempted assassination of the former president. As you just heard there, the authorities, law enforcement, have been giving an update on the situation. What we know so far is that a man with an AK weapon was seen near Mar-a-Lago, where Donald Trump was apparently located at the time, playing golf. We know he's a golf enthusiast and he owns the property. It was his own golf course at which he was playing. Some suggestions that the shooter was between 300 and 500 yards away. Now, that sounds like quite a distance, but the individual appears to have had a very serious weapon at his disposal, and it does appear that Donald Trump faced significant peril. Well, he is in one piece. He is safe. An individual is now reportedly in custody, and a weapon and scope have been recovered. Meanwhile, what's the latest on Trump? Well, he's returned to his Mar-a-Lago resort in Florida. And, of course, this happened at his West Palm Beach golf course. It's a world-renowned golf course. The FBI has said it is investigating an apparent assassination attempt. Earlier in the evening, it was thought that the gunfire was incidental, not related to Donald Trump. Well, that doesn't seem to be the case. In a short statement a time ago, the president said that he's safe and well and will never surrender. Now, his opponent, Kamala Harris, in what has been an increasingly bitter and, if I'm honest, a little unhinged presidential campaign, says that she's very glad her presidential rival, Donald Trump, is safe. This after gunshots heard in his vicinity. She said violence has no place in America. In a White House statement a short time ago, the president and vice president were said to have been briefed about the security incident where the former president was golfing. They are relieved to know that he is safe. They will be kept regularly updated by their team. Well, let me tell you that Donald Trump is pretty fiery about this. Now, on the 13th of July, he was shot in the ear, and the security services dragged him to the ground. He got back up at the podium, waved his bloodied fist in the air and said, "Fight, fight, fight." Well, he struck a similar tone this evening with his latest statement. Here's what he had to say, folks. Can you just let me do that? Thank you so much. So here's what Trump had to say. He said, "There were gunshots in my vicinity, but before rumors start spiraling out of control, I want you to hear this first. I am safe and well." Trump goes on, "Nothing will slow me down. I will never surrender." He goes on, "I will always love you for supporting me. Unity, peace, make America great again." Well, let's get reaction to what looks to be a second assassination attempt on Donald Trump in the company of my top pundits this evening. Former Brexit Party MEP Annunziata Rees-Mogg, former advisor to Boris Johnson, Lord Coolvere Ranger, and ex-Labour Special Advisor Paul Richards. Well, Annunziata, these are dark times, aren't they? We can only hope that Donald Trump and Kamala Harris make it to November in one piece.
Well, and I mean, the earlier reports were that it was just gunshots in the vicinity of, and it all didn't seem too serious. But an AK-47 has a range of 350 metres. By the sounds of it, it could easily have been in range. And when it can do a burst of up to 100 shots a minute, it could have been a very serious situation. It's not a one-shot rifle. It can be a fully automatic one, depending on its setting. But if it is the type of gun they're saying, I think this really could have been a very serious situation, and I'm glad, for the sake of democracy, that it has obviously been prevented.
Most definitely. Paul Richards, do you think the tone of the political debate and the culture out in the States at the moment has led to incidents like this?
Well, we've had terrible shootings, obviously, in America for decades, and it is a violent country, and it just reminds me of the need to have gun controls in America. I think one of the things that should come out of all of this is that you can't have this Wild West in the States where anyone can pick up a gun and use it. We'll see what happens with this case. It does sound like a serious, credible threat to the former president, and I think we need to see as events unfold, but one of the legacies should be a debate about the guns.
Indeed. I mean, this is a human story. This is an individual in Donald Trump who appears to have cheated death twice at Coolvere. It's a dark day for democracy, this, isn't it?
It could have been a very dark day if what looks like could have happened. Now, I think there's three things that jump out to me immediately as we're sort of digesting this incident in real time. Firstly, the copycat nature of events that can happen. We had this first attempt a few months ago, and let's hope, as you said, Mark, that we get to November with both candidates fit and healthy and well. I think the second thing here is we're seeing the security services and the FBI operating very fast. I think they're very bruised by the criticism they took at what happened previously, and we're seeing a very well managed, it looks like, we're telling from a distance here, but they've apprehended the individual, they're locking down the scene, they're reassuring the public, and they're making sure they're on top of it. I think the final thing here is actually Donald Trump's response. We all know he is able to respond in many different ways. He seems to have responded in a very calm manner, reassured people, told them he's safe, so as to not let things spiral out of control, using his own words. So all of this is playing out in real time, but we hope, I sincerely hope, that this copycat nature doesn't start to happen in this election campaign.
Do you think that Donald Trump needs to be less accessible to the public? I mean, I'll be honest, he's on a private golf course. He's actually in a kind of protected territory, as it was.
You would assume so, and I've never been to a private golf course in America, but I'm going to assume that they don't want any old Tom, Dick or Harry wandering onto the golf course at their own free will. They, I believe, charge quite a lot for membership and want to protect it. He should have been in a safe situation. If you're out in the open with long-range weapons, you're never completely safe. I think his response is fascinating. I can't think of many people who have managed to invoke Churchill and John Lennon in the same sentence. But as Coolvere just said, I think it is very encouraging that it is a calmer tone than he took after the last assassination attempt, when it was very much fight, 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 and now we're hearing peace, love. And I hope that does calm down what has been a very febrile campaign.
If you're just
on both sides,
most definitely. If you're just joining us, Donald Trump appears to have suffered a second assassination attempt. Luckily, he has survived it. He's uninjured. He was playing on his golf course in Florida at Mar-a-Lago. A shooter, it looks to have been using an AK. Well, no, forgive me, I'm not that great on guns, but it was some particularly powerful automatic weapon with a scope on it as well. Approximately 300 to 500 yards from the former president. There's a serious incident. AK-47, it was that kind of a gun. But Trump is OK. He's now at home at his resort in Mar-a-Lago. But Paul Richards, what about the political implications of what's happened tonight? Will this change the hue of the race for the White House?
Well, it's already an incredibly divided country, and the election campaign is reflecting that incredibly binary division within America, I think.
Yeah.
And this will focus attention back onto Trump. I mean, being cynical, it may even put him up in the polls a little bit as the focus returns to him after a few days where his cat and dog remarks just sort of dominated the social media space. So it'll put the focus back on that. But it will just remind people, too, that democracy in America is a febrile and fragile thing, and that, there are too many guns out there.
Most definitely, I agree with you on that. Are the US media guilty of demonising Donald Trump and therefore imperiling him in this way, Paul?
I don't think so, because I said before, we've always had in America this undertone of violence. And I mean, obviously, famously, there has been presidents assassinated, and Reagan suffered an assassination attempt. And, this is part of that, unfortunately, part of their political culture. And we've had MPs assassinated here in the UK too, let's not forget. Recently, certainly 2 in the last few years, and, historically 2, but not... We haven't had a Prime Minister assassinated since 1812, and we don't have the same levels of gun violence in our country. So it is a different tone, I think. But it's just going to be a very fractious country and debate for the next few months.
We know that Donald Trump is a maverick and an eccentric character, very unconventional, Coolvier, but has he been demonised by the US media, do you think? Some kind of monster?
No, I don't believe so. I think if those who want to view him that way will view him that way. I think they are... He does speak in a way that can be seen as passionate, aggressive, colourful, some may say. Some absolutely do not like it. They are not into his politics or his view of the world. He is not a conventional politician in any way, shape or form. In fact, he probably will describe himself as the anti-politician. He's a businessman, so the language that he uses doesn't fit easily into the political rhetoric.
Yeah.
So that has made it difficult for people to accept, say, the establishment to accept him, and I don't think he ever will be accepted in that way, whether that's media or politics. But that's no reason to say I think he's been demonised. I think his message still cuts through, because that's how, obviously, he became president.
Well, yeah. I mean, Annunciata, the comedians on US late-night talk show hosts are entitled to mock him, and so they should. That's their job. But do you not think that in some circles Donald Trump has been characterised as some kind of monster?
Yes, but I think the American press is very good at doing that to the people they don't support. That Joe Biden was mercilessly mocked. Kamala Harris has come in for quite a lot of very negative commentary. Her word salad habit, as it were. And Donald Trump has the same. The media is just as divided as the politics.
OK, well, listen, folks, we've got some more live pictures to show you from the United States, if you're just joining us. The FBI are, let me tell you, investigating what they consider a second assassination attempt on Donald Trump. And here are photographs of the alleged weapon, an AK-47 style weapon, seen near Mar-a-Lago, where Trump was playing golf. An individual has been arrested, apparently spotted 300 to 500 yards away from the would-be president, the man that would like to re-enter the White House in November. But this is the alleged weapon that might just have changed the direction and outcome of that race for the White House. But mercifully, Donald Trump lives to fight another day against his opponent, Kamala Harris. Well, let's get reaction now from former government minister and Reform UK spokesperson Anne Widdecombe. And what do you say? It's easy to forget that at the heart of this, yes, you've got politicians, but they're human beings too. And Donald Trump might have lost his life this evening.
Well, indeed. And of course, he came extremely close to losing it in the not so long ago assassination attempt. And I mean, he must be feeling, however brave a front he's putting on a very brave one. He must be feeling pretty vulnerable, I would think, in the run-up to the election. But he has survived, and he has made it very clear that he's carrying on. And in a way, his attitude is a bit reminiscent of that we saw from Thatcher after the Brighton bomb, when people died and they'd had a really good assassination attempt at the cabinet and Mrs. Thatcher. And she just insisted that the conference went on. She didn't stop. She just said things go on as normal. That's what he's doing. I think he's right to do that. But I think as a human being, he will be feeling pretty nervous now.
Do you think he needs more protection? You're a former Home Office minister. Would you be able to do much to keep him out of harm's way, Anne?
Mark, I think I've quoted this on your programme before. But when Harold Macmillan, who was, of course, British Prime Minister, when he introduced his bodyguard to somebody, he said, "Here is the man who shoots the man who's just shot me."
Yeah.
And the fact is, very often, prevention can be massively difficult, and that's the real question here. The security forces have obviously acted with huge speed, huge efficiency, should be commended. But of course, if those shots had found their mark, none of that would have counted.
Donald Trump's family will be very worried this evening. Will they be advising him to stay out of the public eye? Is it time to give up those rallies outside or even playing golf?
I don't think he would take such advice for one moment. He would see that as giving in, and I don't think that's in his character. And I think he will carry on quite defiantly, and quite right. So he should.
What about the politics of this? It's a perverse question to ask you, Anne, but will it help him politically after, let's be honest, a tumultuous week?
Well, he's had a bad week, and the remarks about cats and dogs were, somewhat foolish, and I think most of us would think that. But yes, this will, if one wishes to be cynical about it, this will help, but I doubt if that will cheer him up.
Definitely. And Kamala Harris, of course, his opponent, is in a difficult situation now because she clearly wants to defeat him in November, but she's going to have to approach this contest more delicately in the days ahead, perhaps.
Well, she's got to be very careful what she says about him now. I have no doubt that she will repeat several times that she's glad that he's safe and glad that the assassination attempt failed and it was bad for democracy. I'm sure she will do all that, and she should do that, and I'm sure she'll also mean it. But I think this will give Trump a slight edge, but, what a price to pay for that edge.
It will affect him mentally, Anne.
Oh, I'm sure it will. I mean, it may not disable him mentally. I mean, it may not affect him to the point where he underperforms. But as I say, I'm sure he'll be feeling nervous. Who wouldn't? Who wouldn't, when there have been 2 attempts in as many months?
Do you feel that American politics is becoming a more dangerous place, or do you agree with Paul Richards, former Labour advisor, that actually it was ever thus, going back to JFK and beyond?
Oh, it was ever thus. I mean, JFK, then there was an assassination attempt on Bobby Kennedy, then there was one on Reagan. I mean, there have been attempts or successful assassinations throughout American history. There's nothing new about it. But of course, the deep irony of this is that there is no stronger supporter of the right to hold arms than Donald Trump himself. He's always upheld the right of American citizens to bear arms. I don't think he's going to change that.
No, I think it's unlikely. He's going to stick to his principles, isn't he? And, of course, the campaign will continue. But do you think the tone of the debate will be different between the 2 candidates going forward? Do you think Donald Trump will change?
I doubt it very much. I'm sure his team will have said after the last event, he's got to be a lot more careful what he says. I'm sure he will be taking that advice. But I think that will be born not of this attempt, but of the fact that he did make a mess of that debate. And I don't think his strongest supporters would deny that.
And why do you think Donald Trump is such a target? Why do so many people seem to want to kill him?
Well, I can't say that there's any rational cause for people who want that. But of course, if you turn somebody into a hate figure, and I think it's been a pretty good attempt to do that with Donald Trump, if you turn somebody into a hate figure, you're going to get that sort of reaction.
And would it be a problem if a man who is such a target became president?
No, I don't think so. And I certainly don't think that should play a part in anybody's voting intention. He's subject to even closer protection if he actually becomes president. If the worst happened, if the very worst happened, then we've got to hope that there would be a good vice president. And occasionally vice presidents, for different reasons, have turned out to be much better than people expected.
And we've seen British MPs killed in the UK. Who'd be a politician in 2024?
Well, it's a good question, but politicians have always taken some risks in choosing that life. I'm very glad I spent my life that way. If I had that choice again, I would do it again, even in 2024.
Is there any way to reduce the risk to politicians in terms of their personal safety? Is there anything you can do, Anne? Clearly, no amount of security guards will stop you getting shot at. But is there a way we can change our politics to prevent these things from happening?
No, I mean, there's no magic answer to this, and there is that tension that always exists, and I pointed this out after the assassination of David Amos. There is always that tension that exists between a politician wanting to be available to the public, wanting to move freely amongst his constituents, and the considerations in an increasingly violent age, the considerations of safety. It is a tension, it's always going to be with us, and it's down to the politician himself or herself the path that is taken.
Anne, thank you so much for your time. One quick one, if I may. Patrick Geary has just messaged me on X and said, Mark Dolan, this is on the Breitbart news feed from an hour ago. He says, there is no question that the US legacy media has relentlessly demonized Donald Trump while treating Harris with kid gloves. And here's the quote. This is a guest on the left-leaning news channel MSNBC who has said, and I quote, Anne, Donald Trump is exactly like Hitler. Now, not only is that untrue, but that's very dangerous language, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It is extremely dangerous language. It's very ignorant language. But some of our own social media is just as nasty. And I'm afraid it's the curse of the age.
Indeed. Anne, thank you so much for joining us. We were going to discuss the Lib Dems, but it's been rather more dramatic this evening. We'll see you in a week's time.
Thank you.
OK, thank you so much to former government minister and a very good friend of mine every Sunday night, of course, our newsmaker, Anne Widdecombe. Now, if you're joining us, gunshots were heard in the vicinity of former President Donald Trump earlier today. He was playing golf on his golf course at Mar-a-Lago in Florida. It's a beautiful state, it's a beautiful place, and it was a nice sunny day, but gunfire was heard. Originally, it was thought to be outside of the precinct, outside of the area of the golf club, nothing to do with Donald Trump. But in fact, the FBI are now investigating this as an assassination attempt. That will be the second in a couple of months. Of course, the 13th of July is the last occasion when, notoriously, a shooter at one of Trump's rallies in Pennsylvania shot him in the ear, of course, millimeters away from having killed him completely. Well, the latest is that Trump is fine. He's in one piece. He's safe and well at home. Now, let's take a listen to the latest press conference relating to what has happened in Florida earlier today, an attempted assassination on Donald Trump.
Now, in the bushes where this guy was is an AK-47 style rifle with a scope, 2 backpacks which were hung on the fence that had ceramic tile in them, and a GoPro, which he was going to take pictures of. So those are being processed right now. The Secret Service agent that was on the course did a fantastic job. What they do is they have an agent that jumps one hole ahead of time to where the president was at. And he was able to spot this rifle barrel sticking out of the fence and immediately engage that individual, at which time the individual took off.
Well, we've heard now from Kamala Harris, who is, of course, Donald Trump's presidential rival. She said she's glad that Donald Trump is safe after this attempted assassination. Violence has no place in America, she said, and in a White House statement a short time ago, the president, that is, of course, Joe Biden, easy to forget that, isn't he, that he's still in the White House, has been briefed about the security incident where the former president was golfing. They are relieved to know that he's safe. They will be kept regularly updated by their team. Now, let's take a look at what Donald Trump had to say in detail. A characteristically defiant message, very similar to his message on the 13th of July, because on the 13th of July, we were on air for this incident and the aftermath. He was shot at in Pennsylvania. He got back on his feet at the podium, fist in the air, blood on the side of his face, and he just said, fight, fight, fight. Well, he's made another statement. Let's take a look at what he has had to say. There were, he said, gunshots in my vicinity, but before rumours start spiralling out of control, I wanted you to hear this first. I am safe and well. Nothing will slow me down, says Trump. I will never surrender. I will always love you for supporting me. Unity, peace, make America great again. Let's get reaction from tonight's top pundits. Annunziata Rees-Mogg, Lord Colville Ranger and Paul Richards. Annunziata, does this change the outcome of the election in November?
I think it's too early to say. It could easily. The elections with this much heat and energy in them can change direction very, very quickly. We have seen that the last assassination attempt put Trump's poll lead up. Then when Biden got replaced by Kamala Harris, it all got inverted. It will be interesting to see where the next few weeks take us and whether there is a clear picture that it's still all pretty close and relying on a handful of swing states.
Paul, I'm afraid, as you know, politics is a cynical business. Will Team Kamala Harris be worried this evening?
Not worried, because, I mean, the momentum is with their campaign, and certainly leading up to this, she was, you know, making great strides forward, and Trump's campaign felt like they didn't quite know what to do or say. They'd lost focus. The cats and dogs thing, as Ann Whitaker was saying, was just very, very damaging. People were speculating about Trump's mental health up until a few hours ago. So it will refocus the campaign, I suspect, but I don't think it will alter the outcome, which I do believe would be a Democrat victory.
You think Harris will lose that? So if you're advising Donald Trump, you've advised Boris Johnson, a former Prime Minister, Colville. How would you be advising Donald Trump this evening? Obviously, the first thing would be to give him plenty of support and a cup of tea and a sit down and a rest. But beyond that, what's the strategy now?
I think, as Paul was saying, there's been a bit of misstep from the Trump campaign in how to handle the emergence of Harris as a candidate.
Yeah. It was a curveball that they didn't catch, right?
Yes, I think they wanted it to happen, but they didn't think it was going to happen. So when it's happened, they haven't really reacted well. And the TV debate didn't go well for Donald Trump. I think he looked like he came in thinking it was still Joe Biden that he was facing. And he came up against somebody who was feisty, who was in his face, who had energy, and she took the fight to him.
And he phoned it in, didn't he?
It felt a bit that way. And so when she started landing blows, he didn't quite know how to take it, which is why he got off piste. He sort of started talking about areas that he really didn't need to talk about. He lost his way. So they have to refocus. And I think this type of incident, it's not what we want to see. It's not what they want to see. Neither camp wants to see this kind of thing happening, let's be clear. But it'll give them a moment to say, right, how do we refocus our message, you know, Trump? How do you want to now refocus your attack lines on the actual candidate? And they have to be different. They'll have to take the fight to her. It's quite close. We can see that it is ebb and flowing at the moment. There's been momentum shifting, and undoubtedly the momentum is with Kamala Harris at the moment. But there will be ups and downs. I think there's just under 50 days left. Things will change. There'll be further debates, and it will be very interesting to see how the Trump team changed their attack lines and their message because of the way Harris is positioning herself.
Absolutely essential is the identity of the shooter is going to matter in this, because if it turns out that is a person from a particular ethnic minority or an immigrant community, then the whole debate shifts around immigration again. And the Trump campaign will use that to reinforce their own narratives.
Or if they're a registered Democrat. That would have a big impact.
It's going to have a huge impact.
It will be seen as being encouraged in some way by the Democrat Party.
Well, all of these points would have. They'll play out over the next few days. But in the long run, into the election, I think what's going to happen here, as you were saying, Mark, is what is it that the Republicans can do to attack Kamala Harris? Where are her weaknesses? And they have to look at how they're going to extrapolate those points. Because, yes, this noise will play out, if I hate to put it that way, but around this attempt. But they have to find the way to take a different attack to Kamala Harris.
And they failed so far, haven't they?
They have.
Annunziata, will US voters think twice about electing somebody that would be such a target if he were president again?
Well, I have to question how American voters have ended up with these two candidates, that I don't think with the population they've got, it's really believable to most of the world that these genuinely are the two best people. But they have got what they've got and will decide between them. And what makes them go either way is...
But would that weigh on your mind if you were in the voting booth about, you know, if I tick the box for Trump, you know, he could be a goner when he's in the White House.
I think...
Does it make him look weak or vulnerable?
I think the Americans are much more used to this kind of attack on their politicians, but also guns being so prevalent in their society, that this was a very foiled attempt that I don't think the Americans are going to react to in the way the British would, because it would be so unusual here. Whereas, as has been discussed, it does happen much more often in America, but also within their communities as well as amongst their politicians.
It's true.
I don't think Americans will be intimidated by this kind of activity happening. But my dear friend in Seattle, I might disagree with you somewhat. I actually think the American people now have a genuine choice. With Kamala Harris entering the race, they can see a dividing line. They can see a battle between these two characters. They are strong-willed characters, clear in what they want to do. They were not inspired. We were all finding it hard to see the inspiring race between Biden and Trump because of the way it was playing out. Trump was almost phoning it in. He felt he could take Biden. It didn't feel like a fair fight almost, this poor guy, you know, in the ring. Now they've got a fighter who's really going at this, at Trump, and I think it's electrified the race.
She can go against Trump, absolutely, but that doesn't make her, in and of herself, an incredibly impressive candidate. I think as Vice President, she has not been particularly impressive. Her policy decisions so far have not been particularly good, particularly before she was Vice President. She's made a lot of missteps. And that I think it is a concern to the Western world that these are the two best people to lead.
You're shaking your head there, Paul, but Kamala Harris was not the heir apparent to Joe Biden, was she?
No, but I think she is coming into her own, actually. And,
what's happened? What have they put in her tea?
I don't know, but it's working. And the fact that we didn't really know much about her and now being introduced to her as the candidate on the stage is working to her favour. It's a good night, by the way, for the security services.
Yes,
they've obviously done well. I mean, Claude made this point earlier,
really
but they've obviously they've succeeded in foiling an assassination attempt.
They most definitely have, and the person involved has been detained, and what looks to have been the alleged weapon recovered. Well, we've got a further development because Donald Trump's running mate, J.D. Vance, has been on X, and he's posted this update about his boss. He said, "I'm glad President Trump is safe. I spoke to him before the news was public, and he was amazingly in good spirits. Still much we don't know, but I'll be hugging my kids extra tight tonight and saying a prayer of gratitude." That is Donald Trump's running mate for the race for the White House, J.D. Vance. Now, let me put this to you, Paul Richards. It's absolutely expressly not my view, but some will be saying it. Has Donald Trump brought this on himself?
No. I mean, this is a product of two things, really. One is the prevalence of guns in American society, and the secondly, probably a mental health issue with the person who's trying to assassinate him. But, I mean, you should be able to go and play a round of golf and be a public figure and do your constituency surgeries and all the things we expect from our politicians, free from this kind of intimidation and threat. So, no, absolutely, politicians do not bring it on themselves. It's a product of other things that we have to tackle.
Well, let me now head straight to the United States and leading US political commentator Hillary Fordwich. Hillary, thank you so much for joining us under very concerning circumstances. How is this news of an attempted assassination, on the life of Donald Trump for a second time in a matter of months going down in America?
Well, I can't speak for the whole nation, and anyone who says they can is ridiculous, of course. But what I will say, great admiration for the fact that almost immediately, one of the first things he kept saying is, "Where's Steve? How's Steve? How's Steve?" Steve was one of his playing partners. I know someone who knows Steve, and they were golfing. They were going into the fifth hole, and actually, excuse me, former President Trump was even par, and he was putting for birdie. And after he found out that Steve was safe, he was just saying that he really wished he could have finished the round. So what I've heard so far, sort of quick scuttlebutt from a lot of people, is admiration. Here's a man who just, if we use what we say in the British Isles and Great Britain, you know, keep calm and carrying on, that's what he's done. Mark, he hasn't been whining, he's not crying, he's not being dramatic. He just was concerned about somebody else, Steve, and he's carrying on. I think that's very admirable.
I'm staying in a hotel.
Indeed. And can I ask you about the general reaction politically? I mean, what do we think this will do to the race for the White House, Hillary?
I think this will further actually bolster the character issue about him being very strong. I think that he's strong, he's more stable than people give him credit for. If you remember, back in 2016, the issue was, oh, you know, he's so erratic, he's so volatile, and he'll make the world a more dangerous place. Meanwhile, we had peace and prosperity under his, when he was president, under his administration. We haven't had that in the last 4 years. So what I do think is people will look and say he stayed calm, he stayed sensible about this, and this, I think, will add to his image of being somebody that doesn't crumble under such literally fire, no pun intended.
I mean, what are the chances of Donald Trump making it to November in one piece? How can you protect a human being to that extent in an election campaign, Hillary?
Obviously, it's very difficult. I'm not going to say that this is going to happen again, but obviously there's a lot of nutcases out there. I will say that the Secret Service in this instance did a magnificent job, as did local law enforcement. Everybody acted extremely quickly. I think that's a very good sign. I think that's something that's actually sort of bolstered American spirits, because as we know, the last issue in Butler County there was a total shambles. So I think that's very solid, but I can't speak, Mark, for between now and the election. All I can say is that anybody who's sane and decent would hope that he does remain safe.
Indeed, his family will be deeply worried at this point, won't they? Particularly given that this is the second assassination attempt in a matter of months.
Actually, yes, you're showing some footage there of Melania. She said after the last assassination attempt that she was so shaken that this would happen to her husband. She was really, and of course, the sons were devastated. And a very dear friend of mine is close to one of the sons and said that the whole family was shaken to pieces. Of course, anybody's family, anybody who loves their father and grandfathers. We saw his granddaughter at the convention there. So I think that this is shocking and terrifying for a family. I do know, actually, there are some other great Americans who haven't run because they had received so many death threats. I mean, I'll just give you one example, Colin Powell. He was a very popular, very stable, wonderful individual, general, and he wouldn't run because his wife was too terrified with how many death threats he had received. And many have received death threats and decided not to run. So kudos again to former President Trump for having the courage, the guts to do so.
Indeed. Can we talk about the tone of the campaign and also some of the media's coverage and characterization of Donald Trump? Because we've got this MSNBC guest who referred to Donald Trump as exactly like Hitler. This was the Reverend Dr. Jackie Lewis speaking on MSNBC's broadcast of The Saturday Show, likening Trump to Hitler. How symptomatic is this of the discourse in US politics?
Well, actually, I think what it shows, Mark, is how many Americans, don't know enough about their history, because if they knew anything, of course, about Adolf Hitler, they wouldn't say something so absolutely pathetic and ghastly. So it shows their ignorance, number one. Number two, it's this sort of rhetoric. People that don't know their history, have no clue, and are just trying to pick some name out of history that they think will spin people in the wrong direction. So I think it shows a highly uneducated and I think it's a great pity. I would prefer discourse that has facts and data and facts. Let's talk about economic policies. Let's talk about the corporate tax rate. Let's talk about what Kamala Harris's policies that have devastated California would do to the United States of America. Do you know, in all of California's history, Mark, it is the only time there's a population decline in California. Why are people leaving? People don't leave somewhere that's very prosperous. People are leaving, like Chevron just left, because it's a failing state. That, if you want to elect Kamala Harris, is what you'd get with the rest of America, a failing nation, if she was elected.
Hillary, following a stumbling performance in the US TV presidential debate against Kamala Harris, some are arguing that Donald Trump is not the force he was in 2020. Is that fair?
I wouldn't say that his debate performance was excellent, correct. I don't know that I don't think really it's that he's changed. I think that he wasn't as prepared as he should have been. He was on the campaign trail, didn't think that he needed to. I think, unfortunately, he didn't stick to enough facts about his policies and how the nation was under his administration. You know, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? The answer is no. But he could have given a lot more concrete information instead of platitudes, Mark. So actually, I think the fault lies at his team and those around him for not saying, for example, Kellyanne Conway's absolutely brilliant. I wish she'd had her way, which I understand from many insiders. She didn't have her way as much as she wanted, which is give all that information and the data. Instead, he relied on platitudes that don't work. And you're right, made him look not quite on his game like he was in 2016.
Will he use this awful incident today to recalibrate his campaign and start again? Because it's not working, is it?
I don't know that it's not working, Mark. I wouldn't say that it's not working. I would say it needs reinvigorating. I can't say if this is going to be, when you say used, I don't know, leveraged. I will say that if they let it play and position it the way it actually happened, and his concern, like I mentioned earlier, his concern for Steve, how he stayed calm, how he was doing all the right things. And by the way, something else, I know somebody in the Secret Service who shared that he went around, Mark, to every single member of the Secret Service and thanked them for their work when he was like back up and back out there. I think that that's exemplary. Those sort of things should come out more. What I fear is the other side is just going to talk about the fact, oh, yes, he was golfing. Meanwhile, we don't know where President Biden is, and he spent most of his time on the beach. So I think that it depends how the campaign handles it, positions it, and leverages it.
Hillary, he's a maverick and he's an eccentric, but why is Donald Trump such a hated figure in some circles?
That's a very good question. Actually, before he ran, do you know, and this is not a talked about fact often nowadays, even Jesse Jackson on the left, who was a black politician, he was honored for his role and his work for all the Black American colleges. And he was actually a darling of the left. Only when he came down that escalator and running, because he ran on conservative, hardworking principles, was he then denigrated by the left. I think that's a great pity. And I think it's a pity that he doesn't stick more to his facts and his policies, Mark. If he did that, then he would reinvigorate his campaign. Then he would do much better than he does. Unfortunately, he does go off on tangents. Unfortunately, he uses platitudes like a great economy. Don't say a great economy. Use the facts, use the data, use the unemployment rate. His unemployment rate, Mark, was only tied with 1969, 3.5%. Just keep saying that. We had the lowest unemployment since 1969, but he doesn't. And I wish that his team around him would coach him and counsel him with more facts.
Hillary, it's so good to see you again. It's been a long, long time. My thanks to leading political commentator live from the United States, Hillary Fordwich. With me in the studio, Annunziata Rees-Mogg, Lord Courvier Ranger and Paul Richards. Courvier, is American democracy falling apart?
No, I wouldn't think so. I think we've seen a lot of challenge to the American model. I think Donald Trump has brought that challenge to the American model, this, you know, the two-tone Republican-Democrat model. He's made it bend to his will. And I think people have reacted, the establishment, the mainstream media and others, quite badly to that because he's an outsider. He doesn't play by their rules. And that hasn't gone down well. And that's why we hear the, you know, the words of demonizing him, the way they describe him. But he did tap in to a large part of the American psyche, to some of the key issues that middle Americans and a vast amount of Americans felt needed to be raised, and they wanted somebody to champion that. And he has. He's tapped into that. Now, you can't blame him, and you can't call him, you know, you can't throw insults and name-calling for him to being successful as a populist politician, whether he's a businessman or not. I think what that's done is test the American model, and what we've seen is the Republican Party bend to his will and become aligned with him, because they try to compete, they try to fight him, and then they realised, actually, he was the game in town. And I think that's why he got this second nomination this time.
Annunziata, he's a larger-than-life personality, one of the most famous men in the world, a gifted entrepreneur and self-publicist. But is he an asset or a liability to the Republican Party, do you think?
I think he's massively both. That he is absolute Marmite. It's a love him or hate him situation, and a lot of people think he is the best thing to happen to American politics in generations. And a lot of people think he is deeply dangerous, deeply untrustworthy, and an unpleasant man. He does evoke strong emotions in people, and I think the assassination attempts are potentially a reflection of that. But he does also get people enthused about politics, and there's got to be value in that as well, that it's a very difficult situation to call on either side, because you want people to be engaged and passionate in politics, but obviously you don't want them going into the violence.
Now, you're a key figure at a new movement which is called the Popular Conservatives, and Mark Littlewood runs that organisation. I think that Liz Truss, Suella Braverman, all keen supporters. Do you think that Donald Trump is a good flag bearer for Western conservatism?
As Culver was just saying, he has bent the Republican Party to his vision, and on
is it a conservative
things,
vision?
It's not very conservative. I mean, it's incredibly protectionist.
America first.
America first, which I would never agree with, that I think you should be open to trade and global opportunities, whilst, of course, making sure your own population are doing well. But he is looking to pull up the gates around America, not just over immigration, upon which I would agree with him, but in terms of trade that would ultimately be very damaging for the American people.
Yeah, Paul Richards, the Republican Party have bet the house on Donald Trump, haven't they?
He's a classic disruptor, isn't he? You know, if he was a business, he'd be Uber, sort of disrupting a market. But he's created a kind of populist playbook, which has been emulated around the world, by the way, which is all about, they're all out to get me, only I speak for the people, the media are against me, the establishment's against me. And you can see that being played out in all kinds of polities around the world. This assassination attempt, by the way, will feed into that narrative. You know, he will say, he'll hunker down and say, look, they're trying to kill me when I speak up for you, the people. And it will, feed into his populist narrative. But I think it's very insidious, and I think it's in some ways undemocratic. And I think the Republican Party will actually rue the day, because I don't think they'll win, and I think it will distort their politics as a party.
Is Donald Trump, Culver, someone that made the Republican Party with that stunning victory in 2016, and is he the same figure that will break the party in November?
Potentially. I think, although I take Paul's analogy of Donald Trump being like Uber, because Uber, yes, are a disruptor. They weren't liked by everybody else when they arrived, all the other services that they were challenging. But the actual people who use the service like it now. It's getting better. Even the people working for you, talk to Uber drivers, they're very positive about. So, you win people over, even if at first you're seen as ugly and horrible and we don't like you. There's a question of where does he get to in November. If he loses, it will be about how he takes that defeat. Will there be a gracious Donald Trump? It doesn't feel like there will be, and that's the problem for the Republican Party. What happens after a potential defeat to the Republican Party, and where do they go? And I think just one final point on Donald Trump and America, that old adage, we get the politicians we deserve.
Yeah, most definitely. Well, folks, what a momentous occasion it has been this evening, and a very, very dark day for the Western world, and an attempted assassination on Donald Trump. I'm pleased to say that Donald Trump is in good shape. He was not injured in what appears to have been an attempt on his life. A shooter with an AK-47 style rifle, which had a scope on it as well. The weapon has been recovered. The alleged shooter now in custody. We've just been listening to a press conference in which apparently the shooter was 300 to 500 yards away from Donald Trump, close enough to have killed the would-be president. So significant development in the race for the White House. Of course, Joe Biden is across this, and Kamala Harris, and we'll bring you more on this developing story.
All right, 1:30 this afternoon, call came out, shots fired. That was called in by the Secret Service. Because we're in constant contact with them all the time, we were notified of that, and we had units here that immediately sealed off the area. Fortunately, we were able to locate a witness that came to us and said, hey, I saw the guy running out of the bushes. He jumped into a black Nissan, and I took a picture of the vehicle and the tag, which was great. So we had that information. Our real-time crime center put it out to the license plate readers. And we were able to get a hit on that vehicle on I-95 as it was headed into Martin County. We got a hold of Martin County Sheriff's Office, alerted them, and they spotted the vehicle and pulled it over and detained the guy. After that, we took the the witness that witnessed the incident, flew him up there, and he identified as the person that he saw running out of the bushes and jumped into the car. Now, in the bushes where this guy was is a AK-47 style rifle with a scope, 2 backpacks which were hung on the fence that had ceramic tile in them, and a GoPro, which he was going to take pictures of. So those are being processed right now. The Secret Service agent that was on the course did a fantastic job. What they do is they have an agent that jumps one hole ahead of time to where the president was at. And he was able to spot this rifle barrel sticking out of the fence and immediately engage that individual, at which time the individual took off.
And this is a GB News special following an attempt on Donald Trump's life on the 13th of July of this year. Well, history has repeated itself, this time mercifully Donald Trump intact. An attempt on his life the FBI are investigating. Earlier in the day, gunshots were reported in the vicinity of Donald Trump at his golf course at Mar-a-Lago in Florida. Well, since then, the FBI are now approaching this as an attempt on Donald Trump's life. A weapon has been recovered, an AK-47 style weapon with a scope. The latest we have is that Donald Trump was approximately 300 to 500 yards away from the shooter. This story could have panned out very differently, and it could have taken a very dark direction for American democracy and the free world. But as I said, with good fortune, once again, Donald Trump has cheated an attempt on his life. He's back at home now at his compound in Mar-a-Lago. We've heard from his opponent, Kamala Harris, who said she's very pleased that he is safe. As you'll see there, that's a motorcade. Donald Trump in one of those cars, we understand, being escorted away from the golf course. Now, you'd expect him to be safe on one of his golf courses. These golf courses are world-renowned attractions, and they are protected with fences and security, but still a shooter managed to get close to Trump in what could have been a political tragedy for America. So the Secret Service are all over this. I understand that they shot at the alleged individual who's now in police custody. They've got the weapon as well. And Joe Biden, of course, serving US president, is across the story and wishes Donald Trump well after what appears to be a very traumatic incident. So, look, we're going to speak to experts across the pond, the implications for this politically, and also whether or not the election will have a different hue going forward. For reaction in the studio, I'm delighted to have the former Brexit Party MEP and political broadcaster Annunziata Rees-Mogg, and 2 headliners, stars and GB News contributors, Josh Howie and Carey Marks. Josh, can I start with you? Your reaction when you heard this breaking news that Donald Trump has once again cheated death?
Yeah, I mean, well, the first thing was they were saying that it wasn't actually an assassination attempt, that it might have been gunfire between people outside of the course.
Because it's America and that happens all the time?
Yeah, it's just, you're more like, it's like being in New York and being near rats.
Yeah.
It's like there's always going to be a gunfight about 6 meters away from you. But now as more evidence has emerged, and this was the Secret Service doing their job this time. It seemed like they were a hole ahead. That's what I read. And they saw the gun sticking out, and they fired. And the man ran off. He drove. They caught him about 50 miles later. Supposedly, he's a white man in his 60s. That's what I read on a newspaper website. Because I did some research.
Well, then it must be
because I'm an expert. And but yes, of course, this is good news for democracy. All right, this is not how a Western liberal democracy is meant to function, through violence or threats of violence.
Well, indeed, Carey, you can hate Donald Trump or you can love him.
Oh, thank you.
Exactly.
It's nice you give me choices.
Knock yourself out.
OK.
Eeny, meeny, miny, mo. But what's important is that all our politicians are safe.
All our politicians.
Yeah, I mean, like, you know,
it's not
in
likely
the West,
to happen here.
the free world, you know, the UK, America, any democracy, we've got to make sure that those participating in it are not in peril.
Oh, I generally think that's a good idea. I think, you know, being shot at shouldn't be part of the deal. But, you know, at the moment, we don't know a whole lot about it. The suspects could just about be anyone. It could be someone who's angry about the cats and dogs comment, for all we know. It could be J.D. Vance trying to be president too early. But it's not the first time a president's been shot twice, either. There's been quite a few. And Abe Lincoln, of course, was shot twice. And, you know, the first time was before he was president as well. So, you know, it happens. But I suppose now on a golf course, which a president can't play golf, is really going to hit them hard, I think, with all of them.
Definitely.
So, yeah.
The bottom line, Annunciata Rees-Mogg, is there are lots of people that don't want Donald Trump to become president.
There are, and passions are running incredibly high in America. That it's almost as though they're taking attacks on their opposition as personal. That this is becoming very personalised to the individual voters in an almost bizarre way, that there was a definite, you know, upswelling of passionate support for Obama as the first black president back in 2010. But this feels much more personal. It's not that they're representing a group, it's that they're individuals who are inspiring these reactions.
Most definitely. Well, look, now let's head back to the United States and speak to Democratic strategist Bob Weiner. Bob, thank you so much for joining us. Your reaction to this second attempt on the life of Donald Trump?
Well, Mark, thank you for having me. And you know I love talking with GBNews, but not quite like this.
Yeah.
But my first reaction was, how stupid are we already? An AK-47 with a scope, an AK-47 that Bill Clinton banned. Bill Clinton banned it. And Biden was helpful as chair of judiciary in banning it. And the NRA forced a 10-year sunset on the ban. We've done op-eds, Mark, and 19 of 20 mass shootings, those are with 10 or more, are done with AK-47s or AR-15s or their parallels. And that means the NRA is just plain stupid, because they could avoid their worst press if they allowed this ban to be restored. And then the regular guns that are used for shooting deer could be done legally, as Kamala Harris said. She's a gun owner, as is Vance. So that's my first reaction. My second reaction is that I heard your preamble coverage, and it was a guy who got into the bushes around a golf course. You know, I'm a runner, and I have illegally run on more golf courses than I can count on 20 times my fingers and toes. And the reason is because you can't protect an entire golf course. People get in from any direction, and if you go early morning or early night, you can run on them. Well, this guy figured out the way in, and he got in. So I've heard some analysis that said it doesn't take a lot of manpower to do the access roads. Well, maybe that's an answer, too. This is another case, it seems, of Secret Service snafu, a blundering Secret Service. They didn't have a guy on top 150 feet away the last time, and they didn't see him carry up, and they didn't pay attention to the local police that said there's a guy with a gun about to shoot. This time they lucked out. And a witness was there, and a witness took a picture, and a witness snapped the license plate, and they got the guy. And by the way, the media that's saying that they're protecting the guy's name, no, Fox already broadcast his name. I won't repeat it, but it's out there.
It's out there. If you're joining us, and let me bring you up to speed on the fact that Donald Trump has once again cheated death. The FBI are investigating an attempted assassination on the former president at his golf course in Florida. These are live pictures, if you're just joining us, at the golf course, which, as you can see, is cordoned off with police tape. Bob, you are a Democratic strategist. Are Donald Trump's opponents guilty of demonizing him and therefore making him out to be some kind of monster that deserves to be attacked?
Every public figure gets death threats. I was Barry McCaffrey, the four-star general and drug czar spokesman in the White House. And on our way to and from Mexico, we had more death threats. And Mark Nolan from CBS News said, "Is it real?" I said, "Mark, I'm not going to comment." And he said, "I'm going to take that as a yes. It was real." It was real. We had lots of them. That's part of the price. But you said that he cheated death. No, I think he caused his almost death by not banning AK-47s and AR-15s. I think that's more to the point. Republicans are blocking the control of the kind of gun that's the most used in complex situations and mass shootings.
Bob, how does this change the race for the White House?
Doesn't change it at all. And in fact, the issue that should be made is let's ban, as Kamala Harris has said to be done, AK-47s and AR-15s, as was done by Clinton and Gore and Biden years ago, and the NRA stopped the ban from continuing after 10 years. Let's get back to it.
Well, Bob, I would love, Bob, it's none of my business. I'm a UK citizen, but I agree with you. I would love America to be gun-free. But don't you think the genie is out of the lamp now, given the fact that there are more firearms in America than people?
You missed my point. This is an AK-47, a very specialized gun. And those are the ones that are used in mass shootings and now are being used apparently in assassination attempts of presidents or former presidents. So let's stick to the reality. It's the gun. It's the gun. It's the gun. And America has not waked up to the need to ban ban assault rifles.
Now, Bob, you've just said that what's happened today, this attempt on Donald Trump's life, doesn't change anything politically. Isn't that wishful thinking? Because no one's going to be talking about the cats and dogs story anymore. They're going to be talking about this heroic figure that has managed to survive a second attempt on his life.
The heroic figure that could have banned the gun that went after him. Is that what you're trying to say? I don't agree with you. I think that it will not change the equation, and it'll make the case more for what the Democrats are pressing for and the Republicans are refusing to allow, which is some control rational on guns.
Indeed, but if somebody wants to kill a presidential candidate, they will, won't they? And you're right about the AK-47, but America is chock full of all sorts of dangerous weapons, and ultimately, no figure will ever be safe in America.
Yeah, well, if he had a handgun and he's that far away and he's in the bushes, he's probably going to miss. So you got to deal with that part of it. That's the point. He had an AK-47 with a scope.
Bob, as a former Democratic strategist, would you suggest that Kamala Harris changes tack now, or does she stick with the approach she's taken so far?
You mean she should stop saying ban AK-47s and assault rifles? I don't think she should stop doing that. I think she should make that case stronger and say we want safety in America, and Donald Trump should join us.
And what about her wider political strategy? It appears to be working so far. So would you stay on those tracks?
Yeah, you know, my first reaction, you think what you think is, how did he set this one up? You know, but of course he didn't. And of course it was some madman out of the blue that has some motive that nobody knows. And it seems it's single because the FBI said there's no more danger. So apparently the situation is safe now. But I don't think it changes anything. I think she should just add in, let's ban AK-47s and make it a stronger case. I think that should be the changed equation.
Why is Donald Trump so hated?
Because he is so close to Putin. He loves strongmen. He wants to ignore the Constitution. He wants to convict his enemies. This is America. We don't convict our enemies. Because he believes in vendetta and vindication, because he's lying to himself and everyone about the election. And when 64 judges said he didn't have a case, and then he wants to say, oh, those were staged. They included Trump judges. And the convictions on him and his corporations and his foundations that were shut down were with Trump jurors that were screened and were allowed to stay in, just as the other side's jurors were. So this guy is all for himself and not for America, and wants the main thing to do is to give tax breaks to the rich, another $5 trillion to cheat our deficit, to make it worse, instead of helping the poor in the middle.
Or perhaps to grow the economy as he did in 2016.
No, he did not. That is a false statement. He had fewer jobs. He's the only president to lose jobs since Herbert Hoover. And Democrats have had a 5.5% GDP growth because they do tax breaks for the lower and middle. Republicans have had a 1.5%. The Library of Congress did the study. I published it. I did the op-ed on it. And I lectured at your London School of Economics on the differences between the parties.
Bunch of lefties there. Tell me this, Bob, if he's so dreadful, why are tens of millions of Americans going to vote for him in November?
Bias, bigotry, the
50 million bigots? 50 million bigots? 60 million? 70 million?
No, it's a problem. It's a problem, isn't it? It's a problem. And it's a matter of discrimination. It's a matter of wanting.
So they're all racists as well. 50 million racists, 50 million bigots. Basket of deplorables.
Tax breaks for the rich that they think are going to trickle down, and they don't. That is the wrong economic strategy. That is ineffective.
OK, well, listen, Bob, I wish you well. It's been good to have you on the show. Thank you for your instant reaction to this attempt on Donald Trump's life for the second time in a matter of months. Bob Weiner, former Democratic Party strategist, with me in the studio. I'm delighted to have GB News commentators, the one and only Carey Marks, Josh Howie, and former Brexit Party MEP Annunciata Rees-Mogg. Well, a spirited debate there, Annunciata, that I've had with Bob Weiner, demonstrating just how polarised US politics is.
And it's just going to get worse. I think that demonstrated very clearly from Bob quite how big the divisions already are, but how every single incident is going to be used to widen the chasm between the two groups. The idea that almost half, or just over half, because we don't know the result yet, of American voters are bigots and racists, it is a deplorable thought to even hold.
And it's not possible.
It's not possible. You can oppose people without feeling the need to denigrate their characters in that way. But the idea that this will garner support for Kamala Harris because she wants to ban AK-47s, I think in its weird way is just as dangerous, that it's just making these gaps between the two sides bigger and bigger.
Most definitely. Donald Trump in America, a divisive figure, but what does this do to the outcome in November, Josh?
Yeah, well, the problem is, and I think Annunziata sort of really nailed it earlier, is the sort of the cultish politics that we seem to have embodied over the last, and you know, across the West, in the UK and also in America, where it isn't about your particular political positions anymore. It's about who the leader is, and you have to be of your tribe, and your sort of slavish dedication and devotion to them, and you can't hear any different. So you can't ever criticise your own side and the leader. In terms of how it's, and sadly what that means is I don't think it will have much of an impact, because it seemed like at the last assassination attempt, which is a crazy thing to say, the last assassination attempt, it seemed like it was all in the bag for Trump. You know, those images came out, his polling figures went kind of through the roof, and it's seemingly kind of been forgotten it was only 6 weeks ago, but I guess the narrative just moves so quickly nowadays. Then Kamala comes into the race, and then it becomes about she is now in there, and then Taylor Swift. It could well have been a Taylor Swift fan, by the way, because Trump did just say that he hated Taylor Swift, and those Swifties, they're serious business. They've got a lot of AK-47s.
Yeah, they're the new Corbynites. They're the only ones I fear. Carey, obviously, the political discourse in America is extremely toxic. Is there a danger that could happen here?
It's extremely polarising out there, but it's look. I think on the comments Bob just made, I don't know enough about America and about guns and weapons and so on, and maybe there's a point with AK-47s, but it seems to me quite appalling to say this is anything to do with policies and so on. And someone, I can understand people getting upset with policies of a politician, but not to the point where you're trying to shoot them. That takes something different. That's not because he believes in this or has said that. That is because someone has either got mental illness or believes there is some right to do that, to make that decision on behalf of the country. It's a very odd position to take.
Well, indeed. I mean, Josh, Americans are going to be worried every day that Donald Trump will suffer another assassination attempt. It feels like a long time between now and November.
Yeah, I mean, at this rate, every 6 weeks, there's another two coming. And also just the toll it's going to take on him. You know, he's out there, he's on a golf course. Everybody has the right to have recreation time. And I believe golf is his favourite thing. It's, you know, to live under that kind of pressure, that kind of hate directed at you, and to know that it could be over for you any time. It's like the sort of ending of The Sopranos. Yeah. It's not a nice way of living.
Or playing.
Or anything, yeah. No, it's...
ruins a game.
It's just bad. It's bad for the world, frankly.
Most definitely. Well, folks, let's remind ourselves of what Donald Trump had to say following this attempt on his life. He's been speaking through his team about what happened today, and a characteristically defiant message. Here's what he had to say. I'll be honest with you, I'm just struggling to see this. Let's just flash the words up on the prompter if we can. But the main thrust of it was very simple, which is, I'm safe and well, and I will never surrender. He also thanked his supporters. I will always love you for supporting me. Brilliant stuff. He said there were gunshots in my vicinity, but before rumours start spiralling out of control, I wanted you to hear this first. I'm safe and well. Nothing, he said, will slow me down. I will never surrender. Unity, peace, and make America great again. Let's get reaction now from US political analyst and also a man that's spent time in the company of Donald Trump, Roger Gewolb. Roger, tell me about the Donald Trump that you know and how you think he'll be reacting this evening.
I think the first thing that he will react to is the fact that your panelist, Kerry, actually slandered J.D. Vance by suggesting that he might have been involved in this. And I wouldn't be surprised if some lawyers don't start sending Kerry papers for that.
Well, I think Roger, let me interrupt you, because Kerry is one of the country's leading comedians, and I'm very sure that he said that in jest. But I do take your point that perhaps it was in poor taste on this occasion.
He didn't introduce that, and viewers in America and elsewhere won't know that. So I think he might have been a bit more cautious. And this is a serious news report. This is not a comedy show.
Most definitely, Roger. Well, look, I take on board what you've had to say, and I'm sure plenty would agree with you.
I just found it, you know, rather inappropriate. In any event, I think that Donald Trump is, as he says, you know, he will not surrender. This emboldens him. Bob Weiner and I argue on this channel all the time. I'm always accusing him of telling porkies, because so much of what he says cannot be substantiated. He seems to make it up as he goes along, and I've told him that. And that is essentially how the Democrats have become these days. And it's not a question just of the gaps widening. There is something much more serious going on here, which can result in these sort of incidents.
Are you worried about the impact this will have on the mental health of Donald Trump? He's a robust figure, he's ebullient, he's self-confident, but many have suggested that actually he's suffered post-traumatic stress disorder since the first assassination attempt in July, and this will shake him further today.
Well, the people I know who are close to him do not say that that's the case. And my experience of him is that, you know, as Bob Weiner said, you know, presidents get shot at all the time. People get death threats in office like that. I don't think it will. He's playing much. He's trying to save America and the world. And he's not going to let that deter him.
However, Roger, sorry to interrupt you, but following a rather chaotic performance in the TV debate on Tuesday, does he not strike you as a slightly diminished figure?
No, I think he was set up. Tons of people are tweeting me that Kamala's earrings were actually earpieces. They've sent me pictures of them, and that she was being coached by handlers. I have no idea, but this is what a lot of people are saying. The muted mics, you know, worked against him. And of course, it doesn't take a genius to see that they fact-checked almost everything he said and almost nothing she said. You can go on. There have been so many articles and so many programs made about how one-sided that debate was that I think, I mean, I don't think he shined as he usually did, but given the circumstances, I think he did pretty well.
How are we to interpret his decision not to participate in any further TV debates? And do you think he might change his mind after today?
I hope he does. I think his decision is probably a reaction, because I actually predicted that he would wipe the floor with her, and I was completely wrong. I think I would call, as I've written in many articles, a draw. And I think that he should debate her again, but make sure that it's set up with really seriously impartial, neutral moderators and a network that doesn't interfere.
Is this a man who's not quite the figure he was in 2020 or indeed in 2016? I mean, he's an older chap now. Perhaps he hasn't got your energy and your staying power, Roger.
I mean, he's more than he was then. When he walks in the room, there's an aura that explodes, and he's like a 50-year-old running around talking to everybody. He hasn't been diminished. I haven't seen him since the 2 assassination attempts. But I mean, everything I hear about him, he's doing fine. And he's a very, very, very tough guy. And one of his closest friends and advisors says, the word to describe Trump is resilience. Nothing stops him.
He's a very intelligent man, an accomplished entrepreneur, one of the most famous men in the world, a maverick, a disruptor. What a life, what a career. However, is he an undisciplined politician and a liability for Republicans?
Not at all, and he's not a politician. I interviewed Nigel Farage some months ago, and I asked him when we were in the middle of Fishy Rishi and Bates Motel Hunt and all these people just ignored everything we needed said and thought for so many years. And I said, why do we have such bad leaders all over the West, Biden? And Nigel said, because it used to be that we had people like Eisenhower, people who were generals, who had led campaigns and won wars, or people like Trump and Berlusconi, who had built empires and knew how to deal with the public and give them what they want, and people who had been civil servants who had reformed giant public services. They'd done things, and they wanted to put something back. Now, said Nigel, we have I don't know what the collective noun is, Mark, but now we have a bunch of people who are basically Oxbridge PPEs, and all they care about is getting elected and votes. And they don't really think about the electorate that puts them there.
Indeed, but Roger, why is someone of Donald Trump's intellect and experience so all over the shop when it comes to policy? Because I've been listening closely to Nigel Farage myself in recent weeks. He's close to Trump. And Farage, of course, in his own right, one of the most consequential politicians of his generation. And Nigel's been saying, you know, that Trump will prevail if he focuses on policy, but he seems singularly unable to do so. Why?
I don't agree. I don't see why you say that his policies seem quite...
He talks about eating cats and dogs rather than focusing on the very practical implications of unchecked immigration on the southern border.
I think he's made a point, and there have been a flurry of viral videos by young Haitian women on TikTok, for example, explaining that Haitians do eat cats and dogs, and they do sacrifice them for their very serious voodoo religion. That's part of their life. That's part of their tradition.
Is that the best possible example to focus on, particularly if it's come from TikTok? Can't he talk about crime and the pressure on school places and the health service in relation to unchecked immigration? Why does he have to go down the route of, you know, bonkers discussions about cats and dogs, which has made him, Roger, something of a mockery?
Well, it's made him something of a mockery to people here who really don't understand, I'm sorry to say, America and Americans and American politics. Mind you, Americans are even worse at understanding anything outside of their country.
So do you think he was right to talk about cats and dogs? Was that a good move?
A throwaway line of all the many, many, many things that are happening with this illegal, unchecked immigration. It wasn't a speech, ladies and gentlemen, I've come to the podium today to address you about cats and dogs. I mean, this is the kind of unfair, postulating that people do to exaggerate his position. It was one example of many, many, many things, because Kamala has let so many people across the border who shouldn't be there, and they're all methods of crimes, and she's going to keep doing it, and that's it's very simple.
Roger, what will those crucial don't know voters, the swing voters, be thinking tonight?
Oh, well, that's a very good question. Maybe he'll get a sympathy vote from some of them. Maybe they will think that they better vote for Kamala because even if he gets elected, he might get taken out during his term of service, and that can cause turmoil. Or maybe there's a real American hero voice, and that's what I want. That's pure as heck who I want talking to Putin, talking to in Canada, talking to China, North Korea, Yemen, and certainly talking to Iran. You know, we had a very dangerous situation, Mark, a week ago, when Israeli intelligence discovered that Yahya Sinwar, the head of Hamas, was about to take other heads of Hamas and all the Israeli hostages through the Philadelphia Courier to Tehran. That would have changed world geopolitics. Can you imagine Secretary of State Biden having to get on a plane and go talk to Ayatollah Khamenei about the hostages? I mean, it was very dangerous. So these are the things that Trump will be able to combat. I don't see Kamala having a chance.
Always a treat to have you on the show. We'll catch up soon. Thank you so much for your fascinating comments this evening. US political analyst and expert on geopolitics, Roger Giewolb, with me in the studio, Annunziata Rees-Mogg, and Josh Howie and Kerry Marks. Kerry, what's going to happen next? Who's going to win the election now?
I'll be interested to see what happens whether... I don't know whether I can talk right now. Roger's obviously very upset with me, but I was...
Yeah, you better be careful. His lawyers are watching.
I was making a wry comment.
You are occasionally
pointing out we don't know that much yet, and I am a comedian and allowed to say things.
Listen,
I'm not going crazy here.
No, you don't have to worry. I will visit you in jail.
Yes, I'm sure our viewers in this country will be fine with it.
I think Roger was sort of clutching his pearls just a little bit too much there, like, oh, how dare he?
Yeah. Well, he made me think I was onto something. That kind of worried.
Roger was upset. He's close to Trump, and he was offended by your remarks.
I accept that.
But Kerry, you're entitled to deploy humour, which we need at all times. But yeah, so November.
In answer to your question, though,
yeah.
What do I think will happen is we saw a massive spike in popularity for Trump after the last shooting. Whether that'll happen again this time is hard to say. Maybe he'll get shot himself the way to being president. Maybe this is a new tactic. Oh, I better be careful what I'm saying. But
Roger would be happy.
We don't know at this point whether it'd be interesting to see. But I think at the moment it's fairly immaterial. The event itself is what counts, and whether it affects popularity or not is kind of irrelevant.
Josh, my heart goes out to what's happened to Donald Trump this evening. The second attempt on his life. This is a father, a husband, and a figure that many millions would like to see back in office. However, does he strike you as a diminished figure today?
No. We haven't actually seen him today.
No, but I'm just relating to, the performance on Tuesday, which struck me as stumbling. He was on the defensive.
He's definitely looking a little bit older, and he was definitely less focused. He didn't. Did
he look like a comedian that was having a tough gig?
Yes, and because I recognise that look very, very well. I'm in the mirror many times, but it's so I think when he puts out his statement there talking about unity and peace, arguably he's not someone who actually practices those words. But what we're seeing now online is how the narrative has been pushed by both sides. Please don't take this as fake news or not. This has not been confirmed. But what I have seen online is, like I said, it's a white man in his 60s. They've identified who it is. They've already started trolling his social media. Turns out if this is correct, that he actually voted for Trump in 2016 and then has since become a very anti-Trump person. But again, that's not confirmed. That's just what I have personally seen on social media. That could all be fake. But what we are going back to is just this polarization and this inability to express your disagreement with political figures with conversation, with logic, with argument, and instead having to resort to violence.
Is it wrong to hate politicians? Is it wrong to hate Donald Trump or Kamala Harris or Keir Starmer or Rishi Sunak?
Of course, hate. I mean, it's ridiculous.
And yet that's the currency of political debate now.
Then people would say, who is partaking in that? It's the rhetoric that is used by everybody. Everyone needs to sort of calm down for a second and stop putting our entire identity within these political figures. They're just human beings.
I'm glad you mentioned identity, because I specifically asked you guys to be on tonight because you're Jewish, and you know it's my favourite religion. So here's the point. Somebody just said online, actually it's on a TV show in America, that Donald Trump is the same as Hitler. Okay, so as a Jewish person, your reaction to the invoking of the memory of one of history's worst monsters in relation to Donald Trump?
I'm not a fan of Trump, but he's not Hitler, and to invoke and make that comparison is offensive to the people who suffered under Hitler and obviously to Trump himself. It's a ridiculous comparison, but of course anybody compares everything now to Nazis and Hitler, and it diminishes the impact of what that has. Instead of actually going, you know what, I agree with some of the things that he's saying and some of the things that he's not saying. It seems like now you're all in or not.
Kerry, is it anti-Semitic for people to evoke memories of Hitler in relation to a politician you don't think much of?
OK, I think that there's a level where people go to the extreme for any comparison. You know, so they'll always find the worst thing possible. But yes, it's illiterate. It's historically illiterate. It's a lot of these people really need to read a bit of history and understand what Hitler was.
Isn't it?
Well, of course, it's insensitive, but we're in an insensitive world. You look on Twitter and everyone's just saying so many ridiculous things and so many extreme things that that's become kind of normal to us. But I'd rather leave Hitler out of it.
Abusive about you right now.
Are they really getting mad? Are they calling me Hitler?
The Trumpets are after him. They're nearly as bad as the Swifties. Annunciata, we've had an hour or so for this, no more, a couple of hours nearly, for this to sink in. Your reflections on what's happened today?
I think it is going to polarise the American debate further. We will hear more of the hatred, the villainisation of both of the candidates. I think using hate in these terms is ridiculous. That I tell off my 6-year-old if she says, I hate the weather. Well, you don't. You're not that impassioned by it that it's as bad as hate. It's horrible weather, it's grim, it's wet, it's whatever.
I didn't know you guys lived in Wales, but that's another story.
I think we need all, and in all countries, need to take this down a notch or two. But I find it extraordinary that in the American context, you've got 52 states, and about a dozen of them actually matter in this election.
Well, indeed. And you know, we talk about this hate, and Josh is right, you're so right, about how that should not be the currency of politics. I wouldn't normally do this, but it's worth mentioning your brother, who's an experienced politician and a brilliant presenter here at GBNews, former Conservative MP, who's faced a lot of harassment as an MP in the past, with himself and his family targeted for verbal abuse. It's just wrong, isn't it? And it's got to stop.
I don't think you can stop it entirely, but I think you can take the heat out of these arguments. That I think it has become very, very personal and perfectly acceptable to attack individuals, particularly online. Fortunately, it does happen, certainly in the UK, much less often in person. But as we've seen in America, it does seem to be happening in a more physical sense there.
Most definitely. I'll come back to Annunciata and Kerry and Josh in just a moment. Look at that. I am literally the flying presenter. For my next trick, let's speak to a member of the Democratic National Committee for California, Bob Mulholland. Bob, really good to have you on the show. Your reaction to what's happened today?
American presidents killed in office, including my favorite President Kennedy. President Ford had 2 attempts on his life back in the 70s, so I assume this is just another lone wolf who has access to an assault rifle, which I'm quite familiar with because I served in Vietnam and was wounded in Vietnam. It's just a tragedy of Americans. We have too many these type of weapons. But anyway, at least today in America, this worked out fine. The Secret Service got on the job. It also is the weapon of choice for people that go to schools and shoot up kids and teachers, unfortunately.
Bob, is American politics now dangerously tribal?
Well, the majority of white people have not voted for Democrats for president since 1964 LBJ. So I could say, yes, they're tribal. Since the Democrats became the Civil Rights Party, we have paid a price with the majority of white voters. But that doesn't mean that Americans are all hateful and stuff. Like any country, people have people that have mental problems, and sometimes some of these young kids that go to these schools, you read or hear that they were bullied and they decided to take it out on somebody. But this is the greatest country on earth. We just have too many assault rifles on the streets.
How can you detoxify US politics so that figures like Donald Trump are not so demonized and hated?
Well, I think Harris will win on November 5th, and then that kind of anger out on the campaign will soon disappear. I think most Republicans in politics will be happy and move on to a more pragmatic life where we're not always attacking everybody and saying hateful things. Oh, incidentally, J.D. Vance, the vice president for Trump, several years ago, he referred to Trump as America's Hitler. And I thought that was inappropriate, but that's how Vance felt at the time. So I don't look at today or several weeks ago as a sign of that America, 40,000 Americans die every year from gun use in America. Some suicide, the rest murders, and 2 women a day are killed in America by their husbands or former husbands or partners. So unfortunately, that's our tragedy. And but most Americans live a good, healthy life and get on with their business.
Now, Bob, we know that politics is a cynical business. Today's a good day to bury bad news, particularly after a forgettable week for Donald Trump. Do you think this changes the implications for the keys to the White House in November?
Well, that Biden debate was a bad night for Biden. The debate with Harris and Trump was a very bad night for Trump. And it's interesting about politics. The first 6 months of this year, Trump spent tens of millions of dollars saying there's 2 old guys, basically saying there's 2 old guys in this race, but the other guy, Biden, is the old one. Well, guess what? Trump is now seen, and I think that debate showed it, as the old guy in this race. And I think a lot of Americans who are not solid for Trump started having doubts, and polls indicate that, but it's still 6-7 weeks to go. So today attempted to somebody shoot at the former president is not an indication of what happened on November 5th. Lots of things will happen between now and November 5th.
Likely to vote for Donald Trump after what's happened today, Bob?
Oh, I think as long as the economy is strong, and it has been, we didn't have a recession in Great Britain, Harris will win. And this attempt today, or alleged attempt, we don't know all the details, will soon fade from history and the voters' minds. And hopefully there's no more shootings at anybody, including President Biden or on the Democrats, Harris and Walz. But there's a lot of lone wolves out there. And fortunately for candidates, presidential candidates, they have the Secret Service around, unlike schools who have maybe a locked door.
How will the Harris camp respond to what's happening today and has happened and the political fallout?
Well, I can't speak for them, but I think President Biden said everybody's happy that there was no harm to them, and I think the individual's been captured.
Now, Bob, I think we might have lost the line to you there. No, I think I can come back to you. OK, going forward then, in November, do you think there'll be... I'm delighted to say Bob is still with us. Bob, do you think there will be another TV contest? Donald Trump has previously ruled it out, but somebody that knows him well, Roger Gewolb, a global political analyst, has said that another TV debate might be back on the table. What's your view?
Well, obviously, Trump is like a lot of politicians. They say one thing one day and then a different thing the next day. That's just Trump's way of operating, and I assume it's always a possibility. If Trump is able to add 2 and 2 one day consistently, he might say, let's do another debate.
Bob, does Kamala Harris get an easy ride compared to Donald Trump, who's always been, characterized as the new Adolf Hitler? We don't hear such invective directed at Kamala Harris, do we?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. I don't follow social media, but there's plenty of attacks on Kamala Harris. Plenty. This is a country where everybody thinks the First Amendment means you can make any accusations. And it's tragic. For somebody like me, been around, I just ignore it. But some high school students who's trying to pay attention to find out a little bit about how we're presidential, it is terrible that some of these kids see, because they're on social media. So yeah, Harris and Walz get attacked a lot, just like Trump and Vance get attacked a lot.
Would you say that perhaps Harris wins on style, but Trump wins on substance, given the fact that he's focusing on that open southern border, 11 million people having entered the United States illegally in the last 3.5 years?
Well, millions of people come to America, including Ukrainian men who I sent back. And that happened under Trump also. And unfortunately for families, Trump separated those families and laughed about it. But it's an issue. But I tell you, for women under the age of 45 in America, the number one issue is reproductive rights. And Trump is on the wrong side of that issue. And we're going to hit him on it every day in some of the places like Pennsylvania, where I grew up, was born, Wisconsin and Michigan and North Carolina. And that's going to hurt Trump. Trump himself said after the Dobbs decision by the Supreme Court, oh, I think this is going to hurt me. It is going to hurt him.
Kamala Harris is ready to be president, given the fact that she was hardly the heir apparent to Joe Biden a matter of weeks ago.
Well, when you're the vice president, the rule in America is you wake up in the morning, find out if the president's still alive, and then you go back to sleep. Truman got a call. He was over in Congress and said, get back to the White House. And when Truman got back, he found out President Roosevelt had passed away. But Truman immediately took over the efforts in World War II and did a great job and got reelected in 48, to the surprise of many, including the pollsters at the time. You remember that great headline, Dewey wins? Well, it was Truman. So I think candidates like vice president, politicians can rise to the occasion. Sometimes they don't. Gerald Ford almost got elected, even though he pardoned Nixon in 76. But Jimmy Carter did prevail, and then Reagan prevailed in 80. So we have a lot of changes in America. Unfortunately, today was no problem, no injuries.
Bob, what would have been the consequences for America if Donald Trump had been killed today?
Well, let's not talk about that. I just remember being in high school when President Kennedy news came across. I was devastated. And this country has had a lot in that year. The years Martin Luther King, Bobby Kennedy. So it's always a tragedy. But this country always knows how to get up the next morning.
Bob, a real privilege to have you on the show. A very experienced figure of US politics, Bob Mulholland, member of the Democratic National Committee for California. Bob, thank you so much for your considered thoughts on that. Annunziata, Bob wasn't keen on answering that question, but I'll put it to you because you don't flinch from any question. What would have been the implications, the consequences for America if something terrible had happened to Donald Trump today?
I think it would have been extremely worrying that we saw what happened when he said he'd had the last election stolen from him and the violence that erupted. And if he is fatally injured, I think there would be a very high risk of very serious violence. That's right, disorder on the streets. Something akin to a civil war, really, in America's great cities. I think it's not inconceivable at all. They would obviously do as much as they could to prevent it happening, but I don't know which person could possibly stand in and say, this is not the time or place, calm down, because they look to Trump. And in this scenario, he wouldn't be there to tell his troops what to do. Now, I've got family in the United States, and I remember a time in the 70s and 80s when Americans had a big think about who they were going to vote for at every election, and sometimes it was a Democrat, and sometimes it was a Republican. That feels like a long time ago, doesn't it? It feels like people have got very, very entrenched, and that there is no give or take on either side. I was mentioning that, you know, we're looking at 10 swing states that actually matter in this election. The rest are foregone conclusions. It's thousands of votes for a population of over 300 million people. Absolutely. And in California, where Bob was from, it doesn't matter how you vote. It's a given that you know, there are, unless you're in this small number of states, really how you vote doesn't matter. And even there, it's very few that will tip the balance.
Yes, I mean, I've always been a floating voter. I think it's your democratic duty to have a think about which party you're going to elect each time. And, you know, I know lots of people that have voted for all the main parties in their lives, Lib Dem, Labour, Green, Tory, you name it. And I think that's healthy for our democracy. Do you think this kind of entrenched tribalism risks happening here in the UK, or has it already happened?
No, I don't think it has. And I think at the last election, we saw a lot of people lending their votes, being uncertain of who to support, that the trenchant Tories were not even turning out to vote for them, that the left-wing Labour were voting in some cases against their own party. It was quite an interesting and fluid election from the pattern we got. But in America, people are much more aligned. You only have two choices. There's not really a third. But I think the very worrying thing about this election is that part of their democratic process is the primaries.
Yeah.
And we haven't really had them. That Trump was announced as winner before.
He walked his. Yeah.
He walked his, and he was winner before they'd finished. Yeah. And Kamala never faced them at all. And that whole part of their democracy has been denied to the people.
OK, well, let's head back to the United States now. And a very good friend of mine, the renowned political commentator, Hillary Fordwich. Well, Hillary, we spoke earlier. We've had a chance to reflect on what's happened. And we were just discussing the absolute nightmare scenario of anything more serious having happened to Donald Trump. It's critical for American democracy and, frankly, law and order on the streets that both candidates are intact in November and able to actually face the public when they go to the polls.
Yes, you're absolutely right, Mark. I mean, it's a ghastly concept to even think what the society here would be like with civil unrest if anything happened actually to either candidate. And both candidates, and earlier I heard one of the people you were talking to was saying, you know, we need to hear from the White House. Actually, they had, right after this incident, they had said there's no place for violence in our society. And I will say you've heard from many people on both sides saying the same thing. Chuck Schumer said the same thing. So I'm hoping at least from the, you know, the political class, there will be calm after this. And I think hopefully people will take away from this the way to behave. And when people criticize Donald Trump for his behavior, and I will say I do find sometimes he can be uncouth and unprofessional, but he acted with aplomb after this. I had mentioned earlier on the show that he thanked every single member of the Secret Service personally. And the first words out of his mouth after the Secret Service had rushed him off, they smothered him and rushed him away, were, "Where's Steve? How's Steve? Where's Steve?" And Steve was his playing partner. He was golfing with him. They were on the fifth hole. And last but not least, he was more upset that he didn't get to make his birdie putt on the fifth hole and wished that he could have finished his round. I think that attitude and that strength is what every nation needs.
Hillary, Donald Trump is as hated as he is loved in an increasingly tribal US political scene. What happens if he wins in November? Will that break America? What will the reaction be if Donald Trump were to re-enter the White House?
I think it's a very good question, Mark. I don't think anybody can actually say exactly what the reaction will be. But I do hope that because his last administration did bring peace and prosperity, I hope that every American would actually say, look, let me give him a chance. Let's see peace and prosperity again. Let's have unemployment down to 3.5% like it was in 1969. And I will say he has right now the greatest number of black males supporting him than any other Republican presidential candidate in history. Donald Trump has gone into, Mark, places in America that no one since Ronald Reagan has dared go. He went into the Bodegos in New York City. He was surrounded by all sorts of ethnic people, and he was lauded. He was cheered. He's had the courage and the guts to go into some of these most deprived neighborhoods. I think that's very important because a lot of politics has been so decisive. I wish actually he would just stand in front of a map of the United States and point to all the failing states and say, look, look at the states that are failing. Look at all the democratic states that are failing. Because, Mark, they are. People are leaving California in droves. California is a failing state. New Jersey actually is what they call a financial prison. If you try to leave New New Jersey and you don't buy another house there, you get a financial penalty because so many of these Democratic states are losing population. So I hope now, in a nutshell, to answer your question, I hope that every American would give him a chance to demonstrate he can bring peace and prosperity just like he did during his last administration.
Is it a case, though, of the right party but the wrong leader? Do you think that there's a chance the Republicans will rue the day that they put all of their eggs into one Donald Trump basket?
Well, the one thing is, Mark, I will say that, again, I don't know that I don't think anybody would actually say he's the perfect candidate. It's his policies and his strength and his conviction and his dedication to the nation, I believe, that, and that we see consistently across the polls that appeals to so many people. Unfortunately, yes, he isn't as couth as he could be. He's not as professional as he could be. But he has united the Republican Party, Mark, and there hasn't been a politician that was able to do that. So his strength and the way that he works with people, he's been able to do that, whereas other candidates had not been able to achieve the same thing.
Hillary, thank you so much for joining us. There you are, political commentator Hillary Fordwich joining us from the United States. Where do we go from here? Josh Howie, we just have to hope that both politicians are able to face the American public in November. That's the headline, isn't it?
Yeah, of course. But what are the long-term impacts on the American political system, and how does that spread across the world? Of course, America's an example for everywhere else. If this is somehow seen as being normalised, then it's detrimental to all of us, to all of our political systems.
Kerry, any danger that this level of tribalism will come here?
Oh, I think we have tribalism here, definitely, but I don't think it's anything like the polarisation in America, which has become so heavily split. But it's also just this emotional level is kind of worrying. I find it strange even when I hear people talk this way about pop stars they don't like and how they want them dead, you know. And I find it very strange when someone has that, because their reaction isn't actually to that person, it's to everyone who likes them. It's to everyone who votes for them. It's for everyone who applauds them. So what they really want is a large number of people dead.
Annunziata, a couple of seconds. The bottom line is it's anyone's to win the White House, isn't it? The keys to that iconic building are available to all as we speak.
It is. I believe that swing states are 5-4-1 tied. So
too close to call.
Way too close to call.
There you go. My thanks to Annunziata Rees-Mogg, also the brilliant Kerry Marks and Josh Howie. Do keep it GB News, because we'll bring you the latest on this attempt on Donald Trump's life at breakfast at 6 a.m, so you won't want to miss it. Thank you to my team for working so hard this evening and tackling this breaking news. It's been a very, very busy evening. Thank goodness Donald Trump is in one piece, and Kamala Harris. And the winner tonight, democracy. So there you are, a tumultuous day in what has become an extraordinary race for the White House. I'm Mark Dolan. Keep it GB News.
This is your... It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850... Your government sat there, Sean, and he did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tune in to Friday Night Live with me, Mark